Are we good to start?
I believe so.
All right, welcome everybody. We're glad to have you join us for this Provo Municipal Council meeting. This is a budget retreat. We are gathered virtually on Zoom at 2:05 p.m. on Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. Where this meeting is being held via the Zoom webinar service and is being broadcast live over YouTube, I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I will simply conduct the roll call of those who are officiating in this meeting. I'm George Handley, I'm the council chair, and I'm joined by my fellow council members, David Harding, David Shipley, Dave Sewell, Shannon Ellsworth, Travis Hoban, and we believe that Bill Fillmore will shortly be joining us. We also have Wayne Parker, our Chief Administrative Officer, and our Mayor, Michelle Kafusi, and Cliff Strachan, our Executive Director for the Council, and other associated staff who are going to be participating in this meeting. We're grateful to have everyone here. And we will begin with an opening prayer offered by Cliff Strachan.
In heaven, we are grateful this day for the opportunity to meet with the City Council and the Mayor and directors of the various departments to talk about the budget for the City of Provo. We ask, Father, that we may be mindful of the needs of the community and that the wisdom will prevail in the choices and decisions that come out of meetings such as this. We ask a special blessing, Father, on the people of Provo and the people of Utah, the people of the nation, and the people of the world, that our local, state, federal, and other leaders will behave with wisdom and make good choices as they guide us through this coronavirus epidemic or pandemic. We pray that Thou will help those who are suffering, and those who are worried, and those who are struggling, that needs will be met, and that the goodness of people will prevail in all our actions and interactions. And we say this in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I think you're on
George
mute.
Handley, you're on
George.
mute.
I am on mute. Okay, sorry. Word about decorum. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions. Unless otherwise invited by the chair, I would ask that you use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to speak. And please wait until called on by me. I will be paying attention to those raised hands. And the purpose of these discussions is that in preparation for the drafting and approval of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget, each department has been asked to present to the council. In addition to identifying their priorities, needs, wants, and potential costs, their presentation should address the following questions. What is your department or division doing to help the city achieve the goals listed in the general plan implementation section, or any other relevant goal of the department? Are there goals and objectives in the general plan where you feel like you could do more if given more budget? If so, what are they? And do you see important needs being unfunded or underfunded in your department currently? If you received supplemental money last year, what did you do with those dollars, and how did those dollars make it easier to achieve your department or division goals? If you were asked to recommend reductions to your department budget of 5%, how would you go about deciding what your recommendation would be, and what process would you follow in your department to reach a recommendation? Are there other requests related to the fiscal year 2021 budget? We will be receiving presentations only from those departments or divisions we have not yet heard from. There are no budget decisions pending today. Discussions are intended to inform future budget discussions. So we will begin with a presentation by the Provo Mayor's Office concerning their budget, and this will be presented by Mayor Kaufusi.
Mr. Chairman, this is Wayne Parker. The Mayor asked if I would go through the presentation with you, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. She'll be on the line if you need her. So, suggestion was made by our staff that maybe we take a minute and introduce particularly the new council members to the Mayor's Office staff very quickly. And so, John, I don't know, do I have control here? Okay, you're going to go ahead and do that. So, so this is the Mayor's Office staff practicing social distancing a couple of weeks ago when we did kind of an office portrait. And so let me introduce you first then to Mayor Kaufusi, who's next slide. She's been the mayor for a little over 2 years and previously served as a member and chair of the Board of Education for 7 years before coming to the city. She's a native of Provo, born and raised here, got her degree at BYU. She is perhaps outside of politics best known as what I would call the matriarch of BYU football's first family, and is an avid trail runner. If you're up early enough, you'll catch her on trails in Provo. She serves as the city's chief executive officer and directly supervises police, fire, legal, and customer service, along with the mayor's staff. And then she represents the city on various boards. And I highlighted UMPA, Utah Municipal Power Agency, because it's such a substantial part of our budget and operation. Next is Isaac Paxman, who is our deputy mayor, came in with Mayor Kaufusi in November of 2017. By trade, he's a business tax and employment attorney, has law degrees from both BYU and Georgetown School of Law, clerked for one of my very favorite district judges in the whole world, Thomas Green, who spoke a few years ago at the Freedom Festival, you might recall. And then his grandparents were Moreau and Shirley Paxman. If you've been around Provo for a while, you recognize those names. Judge Paxman was a district court judge here in Utah, and he and Shirley were significant drivers in this effort to save the Academy Library building. Isaac supervises, coincidentally, library and parks and recreation. He is the lead on intergovernmental relations, so he works primarily with the state legislature, with the county, and with our federal delegation, and is the mayor's principal policy advisor, sits in most meetings with us, and is instrumental in writing a lot of the material that appears after the mayor's review under the mayor's signature. So we appreciate Isaac being part of the team as well. So I'm the city's chief administrative officer. I've been here since 2003, which probably qualifies me for something, having survived that long. I was previously either the city manager or department head in Ogden City, Roy City, and then 3 cities in Missouri and Kansas before coming to Utah. Have my MPA from BYU. I spent 2 years working as an assistant in Governor Levitt's office, and I actually grew up in California, so I'm not a native Provoan. My role is kind of to serve as the city's chief operating officer. So I supervise basically all the departments we haven't mentioned so far: administrative services, energy, public works, development services, and community neighborhood services. I spend a lot of my day in meetings, but when I'm not in meetings, I'm mostly reviewing and executing contracts or forwarding them for the mayor's signature. And then I work with a number of other cities in the county. I've been very involved with the League of Cities over the years. Dixon Holmes is our assistant CAO, just started in the department, the mayor's office last year. He was previously Provo's economic development director. He's been in community development department before, also has his MPA from BYU. He's the long-term employee in our office. He's been with the city for 25 years. And as you probably know, if you follow him at all, he's a significant outdoor athlete, marathon runner, biker, swimmer, and has competed in a number of Ironman competitions. So he's a pretty substantial part of the community and the organization. He has responsibility as my assistant for kind of broader business relationships, including the Chamber, Downtown Provo Inc., He's the chair of our special events committee that gives review and permission for private events in the city. He's been tasked with digital inclusion in our Google Fiber relationship. He's operated Provology, and then what Dixon will tell you is a lot of his time is really spent on special projects, and he gets involved in a lot of those. Nicole Martin is our Public Information Community Relations Officer. She started with us early in 2019. She was previously the Deputy Mayor in Sandy, responsible for their public information community relations, and actually did legislative work for Sandy. She's a former city council member in Harriman, so she brings an elected official perspective, which has been very useful. A former board member of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and I called her a social media maven, which she would probably reject. But if you follow her on social media, you'll know that term is absolutely accurate. She manages our city communication policy. She supervises the media services division that we'll talk about in a minute. She operates all of our community events that emanate from the mayor's office. We'll talk about those. She chairs what we call our PIO group, which is the assembly of all city agency employees who are involved in public information. So from police and fire to public works to all the city departments have a representative on the PIO group, and they coordinate efforts. Karen Tapahi and your staff sits with us on that group. She manages our social media outreach, does a lot of it, although we have a part-time employee who is involved in some of that effort as well. She's been responsible for the Year of Communications that we're currently involved with, and she is the brainchild and operator of what we've called Conversations with Kafusi that you've seen a lot of in recent weeks. Kaye Neves is the mayor's administrative assistant. She was formerly my and Isaac's executive assistant before Tracy Orm left our operation. And she worked and managed a local engineering firm. So to her great credit, she can actually read and write legal descriptions, which is a skill set that very few people possess in my experience. And then Amber Chamberlain is our newest employee. She is the executive assistant for Dixon and Isaac and I and Nicole. She was a former executive assistant at BYU, Idaho, and a firm in Arizona before moving to Provo a few months ago. She lives in Northeast Provo, and for those who know the Roundy family, which has been around Provo for a lot of years, she is a Roundy. And so we feel very fortunate to have Amber with us, both for her Provo pedigree as well as her skill set. So the mayor's office functions, I've just tried to summarize here. No surprises here that we are the executive branch of city government. So we enforce city ordinance and policies, kind of serve as the face of the city to our residents and other stakeholder groups. We represent the city in formal, informal settings, supervise sort of day-to-day city government, promote and enhance the city's reputation, and try to take the lead on informing and engaging residents on city issues. For vision, we promote awareness of the city and its functions, effectively communicate with our residents and stakeholders, brand the community in a way that is attractive to our community at large, and then we promote and enhance our quality of life in Provo. Those are all important roles. Just going to highlight quickly a few of the general plan and Vision 2030 goals that we're involved with, mostly around communication, transparency, sharing with the community information about forms of government and how city residents can influence policymaking. We encourage government entities to create citizen academies and follow the example of our Provology effort. We work to increase the diversity of residents and stakeholders serving on boards and try to get greater representation and more balance in our boards and commissions. We work on citizen engagement and other important issues, and then try to encourage civility in our community discourse by building bridges of trust between residents and their government, and working with residents on understanding the complications of various issues. So our key priorities for fiscal 2021 that's coming up is continued progress on the City Center project. We expect to break ground later this month on the building, and then we'll be a little over 2 years in construction. Complex project, multiple moving parts, kind of all at the same time. The airport terminal, as you know, we've done a groundbreaking on that. We're finalizing all our funding sources, and we're under construction, at least in terms of preparing the earthwork for the terminal building. Wastewater treatment plant, which again is a high priority for Public Works and is an area where we feel like we need to continue to engage with our residents. Very substantial project that'll be developed over several years. And from an economic development perspective, the mayor's really focused on the West Side Grocery Store and then redevelopment opportunities at the Town Center Mall and at the Mix at River's Edge up in the north part of the city. So to answer the couple of questions you asked, we haven't answered yet, unfunded or underfunded services. We feel like we're rapidly approaching a time when it may make sense to reinstate a federal lobbyist contract. We used to have a contract for many years, and back in the last recessionary period in 2008, 2009, and about the same time as Congress was getting rid of earmarks, we canceled our federal lobbyist contract, and we're starting to see now, particularly with stimulus efforts and other things, that might be time for us to think about reinstating some kind of lobbyist arrangement in Washington, D.C. And then in terms of supplemental requests, last year, as you know, we reformulated the Innovation Fund and combined it with our Mayor's Recognition Fund. And we'll be doing a report to you shortly. We just awarded about $117,000 in Innovation Fund grants to city departments, and we'll be back to you shortly with a report on those. And so again, we're excited about what we've been able to do this year with the reestablished Innovation Fund. So budget divisions in our department, we actually have 6 divisions in our budget. So we have a mayor's budget, which is mostly the substantial part of the budget document for us. Then both the deputy mayor and I have separate budget divisions. Public information has one. We have a mayor general that includes a number of intergovernmental functions. We'll talk about those in just a minute. And then media services is also a part of the mayor's budget. So some notable expenditures in our budget, just for your information. We have a number of interlocal contributions, which include the Utah Lake Commission, Mountain Land Association of Governments, the League of Cities and Towns. That constitutes about $130,000 in total out of our budget. We have contract services in our budget, mostly around we own a Qualtrics contract that allows us across the city, not just in the mayor's office, to utilize Qualtrics for doing citizen survey, customer engagement surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, which we do broadly. We also contract for the printed city newsletter, and we contract with our state and our state government lobbyist firm. We also do special events and public engagement, and I'll cover some of those later. And interestingly enough, for some reason, since long before I got here, the mayor's office owns also the graffiti abatement contract. That could probably move somewhere, but it does give us the opportunity to interact with our graffiti abatement team through the juvenile court, and we're able to do a fair amount of work there. So those are kind of some of the highlights. Special events and public engagement, we do out of the mayor's office the Memorial Day program, the Veterans Day program, Bike to Work Day, Women's Day. We staff and pay for the staffing for the ambassadors who serve along the Freedom Festival parade route to ensure people don't start camping out 3 days ahead of the festival parade each year. We do a number of other city programs and events, sustainability, clean air programs. We do an annual event for Utah County mayors and their families. We do Provo City's birthday, which unfortunately this year got lost to the pandemic. We do the State of the City address, utility newsletters, email newsletters, surveys, Provology. And then we look for unique opportunities on occasion. So we've done a Ride the Parkway event. We have managed the Deer Abatement website. Every 4 years, we cover the cost of the inauguration of a new mayor. And for a number of years, and we're probably due again in the next couple of years, we've retained Robert Carter, who's a local historian, to write a series of books about Provo's history. And I think we're 4 books into that series and probably have more to do. We don't have anything in the budget this year or expected next year, but there may come a point where we want to do that again. We also do resident recognition at council meetings, town hall meetings and events. We've done a number of contests on social media, photo contests, and so on. We've sort of led the effort and helped fund occasional redesign of the website. And then we also pick up some sponsorship costs on some private events that we co-sponsor with others, including the farmers market and some other things. So to give you just a quick highlight, these expenses, events, engagement, and contracts have typically been a part of the council's examination of the mayor's office budget. And so we've highlighted these before. So across our budget, we spend about $65,000 on events. We spend $58,000, almost $60,000 on various engagement tools, including the newsletter. Part of that this year also included our promotion of the census, which was a one-time expenditure. That's included in that. And then contracts, and those are mostly, again, around lobbying, professional services, and that sort of thing. And so the mayor's office total budget this year is about $1,900,000. And so about 15% of our budget is in sort of these high-profile expenditures. Media Services Division, you probably know them best for Channel 17 as they broadcast our city council meetings. We also operate a YouTube channel where we try to do promotional kinds of videos. We also do training videos for internal uses. We attempt to promote citizen engagement through media services and then try to creatively address city issues. I included a picture there of our can video, which has actually been one of our highest viewed videos, where we describe how the 3 garbage cans are used in a very creative format. Staffing in the Media Services Division, we actually have 2 full-time employees. The division manager, Brett Borgett, who operates primarily the video functions. We have a graphic designer who works in that division as well. And then otherwise, we have part-time employees. And again, we've tried to highlight here a few pictures of some of our more popular videos of late, where we've attempted to share information about the airport and changes that are happening there. Captain Tanner's great series on fire safety, and then a memorable video from the inauguration a couple of years ago as well. So online engagement, again, this is one of our key functions. Tried to highlight here some of the things we do. Social media and videos are kind of our key elements to online engagement. We bring substantive events online, as well as bringing people together. And then we share just a few of our metrics, and we took the liberty of comparing just with a neighboring city. Probably should have left them nameless, but just to show you that we are doing some good work in terms of metrics. We have 26,500 Facebook followers and 8,300 Twitter followers. Instagram has taken off substantially in the last couple of years, and then we have about 1,600 regular subscribers to our YouTube channel. And then finally, just wanted to highlight some recognitions. Don't want to put too much focus on this because I think we all recognize that recognitions kind of come and go, but a couple of those that we're kind of proud of as being 2 years ago the #1 best performing city in the nation. And then 3 out of the last 5 years, we have been the 2nd best run city in the nation, including last year. And that one really is very specific to Provo City because it talks about the quality of our city services, long-term debt, per capita budget, and those are things that council members you largely control. And so we're excited to kind of be part of that national recognition of the good things that are happening in Provo. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about our budget, or certainly invite Mayor Kaufusi to weigh in if she would like to.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Any quick questions for the administration? I don't see any. We're very grateful to
Thank you very much.
you for all that you do, and we know that the staff of this city is a major reason why we keep getting all those awards. So thank you very much for all you guys do.
Very much appreciate your leadership and your partnership.
And we appreciate the mayor's leadership. Thank you very much, Mayor Kaufusi.
I'll second all of that was just said. And thank you, Wayne. You did a great job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on then to item number 2, which is a presentation by the Community and Neighborhood Services Department concerning their budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And this will be presented by Gary McGinn, the Director of Community and Neighborhood Services.
Mr. Handley, and I'll try to go through this fairly quickly to leave time for questions as we go along. Next slide. So community and neighborhood services, one of the main things that we see ourselves doing is working in partnership with the council, other departments in the administration to help create a great community here in Provo. Next slide. And in doing that, we have several main core functions. First is code compliance. We do planning. We have parking enforcement, property management, and ombudsman, and CDBG and home programs that we run with federal grants, and business licensing. Next slide. With code compliance, that's run by our zoning administrator, and we have 6 code compliant officers and a division secretary. Our code compliance officers work on cases. Now, if you look at from July 1st of 2019 through this week, during that time, we had new cases, 555 new ones open. And of those new cases that were opened, we've been able to resolve 365. And that's either someone has come into compliance or it's in court and a decision has been granted by the judge. And we currently have remaining from those 555, 190 cases that are open. Occupancy cases make up 72 of that number. And where you have landscaping issues or junk or nuisances on property, that's 230 of those cases. And then we have rental dwelling and health and safety that relates to rental dwelling, each with 42. Now, in those cases that we have, it's always been about 2/3 of our cases deal with garbage, junk, a nuisance on a property, those types of property management issues, and about 1/3 occupancy, rental dwelling license. That's been typically over years, the breakup. Now, since July of 2019, the total number of cases, so this is total number of cases includes not only the ones that were open from July on the previous slide, but ones that were already open. And we've resolved 649 of those cases. And the total cases we have open today are 295 that our zoning officers and our code compliance works with. Next slide. The next major division we have is planning. In planning, the major areas that we deal with that are the boards and commissions that we work with, general plan, parking, sustainability, and code amendments. So in the planning division, we have a planning supervisor and 3 people who function as planners working on things. We have a planner 3, we have our parking and sustainability coordinator, and we have a management analyst 3, who together as a group come in and tackle all of those issues in planning. So we work frequently and closely with the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, and the Transportation and Mobility Advisory Committee. And we work on long-term projects with those groups. With the general plan, one of the things that we're facing, and at our last work meeting, we talked about this, is we believe it's time for a substantive update to the general plan, to really go in and refine what the goals and policies are in the general plan and deal with things from a very large citywide view, integrating all areas of the city into the general plan. We also, in talking with the Planning Commission, I believe they would like to focus their time on doing planning rather than dealing with administrative items. Right now in our code, we have a lot of planning items go to Planning Commission, which would then go on to the Municipal Council for approval, but also a lot of administrative items that are really approvals of individual projects where we really have no discretion. If they comply with code, we approve it. Next, what planning deals with is parking. One of the things that we're dealing with is we're looking and reviewing all the existing permit areas, make some recommendations on that. We're looking at our parking standards that we have currently in our codes that require the amount of parking a project would have to have. We have wayfinding that we're continually working on and trying to get that last bit of signage out there that people can find parking in Provo easily and quickly. We've also worked on recently and have working with the library and some of their spots that they have on library property there on the north side of the building. We're doing an experimental parking permit program there. We're allowing people to park overnight on the library parking lot to see if we can come up with creative ways to provide more parking in our neighborhoods, and specifically this context, the Joaquin neighborhood. And that was going pretty well. As you can imagine with BYU and what's happening with COVID-19, our experiment has been a little bit interrupted. And so we're not getting the best data now, but initially it was looking promising. We also deal with sustainability. One of the things that we're concerned about and looking at is the new city center and making sure that that building is sustainable and will help us in a long-term point of view successfully meet budgets and meet the needs of the community into the future. There's also a citizen sustainability committee that we support. There's also an internal employee sustainability committee. And recently, the sustainability report came out. Next slide. With code amendments, those are amendments to our actual zoning code that we have now. We're trying to systematically go through the code, update things, align that with the general plan, and as changes to the general plan happen, to make sure that our code is actually supporting the general plan and taking the city in the proper direction. We want to simplify and reorganize it. We're also working on eliminating inconsistencies and standardizing things. Our code has been amended a lot over the years, and we would like to bring it back and have a more consistent and holistic approach to it. One area that we're working with is with the council's subcommittee on signage. We would like to rewrite our sign code and take that approach to updating it, taking out some of the inconsistencies or problem areas that we see with it, and making sure our code actually reflects council priorities and desired policy outcomes. Next slide. Parking enforcement. We currently have parking enforcement that we go throughout the city. We give out tickets for parking violations. We have a full-time parking supervisor, and we have one full-time parking enforcement officer. We also have 6 part-time officers. So a lot of this is done using part-time people. And then we have a seasonal officer that can come in and help us with that. Next slide. Parking enforcement, we get through 311 or dispatch over 100 calls a month. And we average from our activities 262 parking appeals a month. What we also do is we're there to assist the police. If there's an incident or something where they need some traffic control or cordoning off an area to free up police officers to do jobs that only a police officer can do, they'll frequently call in our parking enforcement officers who are in uniform in branded vehicles with lights to be able to go in and assist them and free them up so that they can handle their jobs. We routinely do that at Freedom Festival, BYU football games, other big events that require a lot of presence. And then as an incident may happen, we're there and available for them.
Hey, Gary, one quick question. Is that
Yes.
number of appeals per month high? Seems high to me, but I don't have anything to compare that to.
No, those appeals are where somebody gets a ticket and they want to appeal it, or for whatever reason. We go through those. People frequently do that. Often it's to request just a reduction, or there's some sort of issue with it. They're not terribly time consuming, but we do have quite a few every month that come through, and our parking supervisor deals with those, in addition to making sure the enforcement people have what they need out in the field and are dealing with schedules and that type of thing.
All right, thank you.
One of our main goals is we want consistent and enhanced enforcement. We want people to be out everywhere, and really one of the things that we would like is never to issue tickets because people are in compliance and there aren't parking problems. We patrol the neighborhood permit areas. So there are several areas in the city that have permits, and we go in there and our enforcement group does that. We also try to pay particular attention to pedestrian safety. We want to make sure sidewalks are clear, that crossings are clear, and that people aren't parked too close to sidewalks. So as a pedestrian tries to cross, there's a sight triangle visibility that people in vehicles will see them. And so those are really high priorities for us. We have 3 areas. We do the library and Foothill and University Garden. We also have time parking areas downtown. And we go through those areas, and we need to go regularly, but not at the same time every day to mix it up. And they require a lot of effort and upkeep of how we approach those. Next slide. We also have property management in the Ombudsman. Several of the big things that you've seen is the Old County Jail property, which the city bought, is now being developed into the Bayview Heights subdivision down in the Spring Creek area and off Slate Canyon. And we've also been instrumental in acquiring property for the Lakeview Parkway, so now that it can cross the Provo River, and been working on an agreement for a 30-acre parcel near the airport, which I think is going to be coming up soon for council action to support the airport. With property management, we also perform that ombudsman function where particularly unusual cases that seem to fall through the cracks in the community or not clearly addressed by one department or another, the ombudsman can get involved with that to help residents or people who have a question, don't quite know where to go, get those types of issues resolved. And so our property coordinator and ombudsman does a great job with that, helping people navigate the city system. Another area where, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the Ombudsman is Tara Riddle, and she's helped me considerably in a number of cases. So I appreciate the work that she's doing.
Tara does a great job, and I would encourage any council member, if they have a constituent that has a question and you don't know where it seems to fall, and it's a kind of unusual one, how do we really figure this out? Or they seem not to be getting a good response or an appropriate response from one of the departments, go ahead and encourage them to contact Tara. And she's really good at helping people get through the system, especially in some of these gray areas of who really deals with this issue. Believe it or not, new and unusual situations continually arise in the city. We have to figure out the best approach and how to handle it. So now with CDBG and home dollars that we get from the federal government through HUD, we take these dollars and it can go to helping housing and a big range of community needs. And those programs can help with infrastructure, economic development, housing, planning, and public services. And the activities must principally be geared towards low and moderate income residents. We've gotten our recent communication from the federal government letting us know that our CDBG and home, and they're both separate programs, funding is coming through. It's going to be similar to what we've had in previous years. With CDBG, it's approximately 1.2 million, and with home, it's approximately $1.4 million that we'll be getting. There's also a special, because of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 funds coming in. And so as a city, we've gotten recently notification that we can use approximately $750,000 to help the community respond to the COVID-19. This is brand new, was signed into law, I think March 27th. And some of the red tape surrounding these things is being lessened. We're in the middle of the process of analyzing this. What can we use those funds for? And we'll be making recommendations to the mayor's office of what and how we can use these funds to help people in Provo who've been hurt by the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in right now. Next slide. Next, oh, there we go. So with a CDBG home funds, these are some of the CDBG projects that you can see. There's 200 East Bike Path. There's an adaptive playground that's under construction. We also deal with building facades. There's before and after picture on the bottom right. We also have egress window program and the Spree Creek Park. Those are things that were done with CDBG funds. Next slide. These are some continued projects in the city. So a lot of these federal dollars come into the community. We can use them in different places. Next slide. Now with our home activities, again, they have to benefit low-income households. We have 2 down payment assistance programs, one in Provo City and one which we work with throughout Utah County. And we also have a homeowner rehabilitation project, which is in just Provo City. And we work with Habitat for Humanity, rural housing, and other housing authorities to benefit people. Next slide. Here are some home projects that you've seen. The top one is one in American Fork. The one on the left of the middle row is one in Provo, and then the Mazer School Apartments in the middle. And then there's another project that was done in Springville. And so you can see in the bottom left 2 pictures are the Taylor House, a before and after of what these funds can do. Next slide. is a continuation of some home projects. These are projects that are happening or in the county and in Provo. Next slide. We also do business licensing, so all things licensing. So if you need a business license, a beer license, an animal license, rental dwelling, special events, we deal with those things. We have over 7,300 rental dwelling licenses. Animal license, you want chickens in your yard, we help with that. Next slide. So for our department, some of the future issues that we see is just the big one is the demographic changes that we see in the increase of population and the changing demographics within that, how we're getting a little younger and older in our community, and the housing preferences and types. As Provo grows, we still have very rural areas of Provo, but some suburban and very starting to be quite urban areas of Provo. Infill development is going to be big in the future for us. Next slide. Housing affordability is one of the big issues that we'll have, and I don't quite know how we'll have to deal with that. With the population growth that's coming, the number of housing units in the county in the next 30 to 35 years or so will need to double. If we have the same average people per household that we have today in the future, when the population in this county doubles, we'll have to double our housing in the county. And so what does that mean for our infrastructure, our roads, utilities, parks? Transportation's a big part of that. And how do we take our transportation, and do we need to rethink the premise upon which our transportation is viewed? And how are we going to approach transportation? Does it need to be more alternative transportation, more public transportation emphasis, and a little less on single use automobiles? And that's hard to balance, and that's hard to have a conversation around. But I think it's an important area that we need to go in the future. Additional parking permit areas. I think there's going to be more and more pressure for permit areas in the city, how we deal with those. Next slide. Some of our needs, we have 6 zoning enforcement officers right now, with some people taking other opportunities. We're at 5 right now. We're going to be down to 4 here in just a little while. And we could use additional code enforcement officers beyond the 6. A couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, I believe, the council gave us 2 additional code officers, and we went from 4 to 6. That additional 2, what it really helped us do was weather the storms of the ups and downs of productivity as we had people come and go. One of the problems that we have in code enforcement is having long-term employees. Our employees average under 2 years here. And we have a lot of turnover, and we're trying to figure out ways to make it more stable and entice people to have this as a career and stay longer. The turnover is very difficult to deal with. Also, additional parking enforcement officer, a full-time one, would be very helpful for us. We could use that now to go from 6 part-time and 1 full-time to 2 full-time and 5 part-time would be very helpful. Additional parking permit areas is almost for sure going to require us to have additional enforcement officers. As far as the council, with the parking that we have with that, one of the things we're looking at is we need to get another license plate reader, LPR, and we'd like to actually have for downtown an ATV side by side. It's difficult to do enforcement with a full-size vehicle. We end up blocking traffic, and it's not very efficient to have somebody walk through and do it. We need the LPR to be able to do it, and to be able to take some computer tablets that are mounted in our vehicles would help us be much more efficient. And I think that's the end of the slides. Leave opportunity for questions if you have any, but could also quickly go through and talk about the general plan and what we've been doing with it. One of the, or how we're meeting the goals, the council's goals of the general plan. Code enforcement was one of the council's top 6 priorities in the last 2 years. And so was dealing with the general plan and working on that. And we're intimately involved with that. Another from the top 6 council priorities was housing and housing affordability. And we deal directly with that. And so in those areas, we think if we had more budget, we could move the needle in those areas. One of the questions coming up is, what would our department do to achieve a 5% reduction in our budget? Our budget, as you can imagine, is very light on capital improvements and projects and very heavy on people. And so any reduction really of 5% or so would be a reduction in force. Some of the things that we could do with that is, as people leave, we could not rehire, we can reprioritize people in the department to do different things. And so that's how we would achieve a 5% reduction if we were needed to look at creative ways to do that. Any questions? I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary. Any questions for Gary before we move on?
Trying to raise my hand here. Hang on.
Mr. Harding, I'll just call it that.
All right. I apologize. I'll be better prepared next time. So, Mr. McGinn, appreciated your presentation. Very good. I just wanted to just comment at how appreciative I am at your philosophy as far as parking enforcement. We look at all of those different violations, tickets written. We're really not interested in writing tickets. We're really not interested in parking enforcement. What we care about is parking compliance. And I would love to see 0 tickets written because everyone's complying. And if everyone looked at that map where those tickets are being generated, the hot spot is south of BYU campus in the Joaquin neighborhood. And I just kind of highlight that because with Mr. McGinn and the others and several others, we've been working on a parking permit program that hopefully will result in much higher parking compliance and much less need for parking enforcement because we have a system that works for people and therefore we won't need as much enforcement. But anyway, thank you.
Mr. Sewell, you have a question?
I was just curious about the handheld radios, what your department uses those for.
When we're in the field, we're in contact with dispatch. And we need that to communicate. If an incident happens, we need to communicate. We have old radios and we need to update them so that we can not have any communication lapses. Also, frequently as we are out patrolling, if we see something that seems suspicious or there's a problem area, we want to be in quick contact with dispatch in the police department to bring emergency personnel or a police presence to an area. So parking, not only are we trying to have parking compliance and in making things better that way, we're another set of eyes and ears out there in the community and work closely with the police department to help them. We're not police officers and we know that. We're not trying to do things, but we can communicate quickly with them. And so that's actually a fairly important one for us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Gary, I have a quick question, and then maybe we're probably out of time. But when you mentioned the overhaul of the general plan that you are recommending, am I correct in assuming that your office would be the one? I'm wondering who is going to be putting in the budget the request for the funding to. I mean, you didn't mention specifically hiring outside consultants, but we had talked about that as a desirable method for doing that general plan revision. Would it be your office that would ask for that money?
We could. That could come in our office, and we could work to come up with a number of what we think. Part of it is, to what extent do we want a consultant? If we want a consultant to come in and do everything, then it's going to cost a lot of money. If we're internally going to be doing things, then we can reduce the cost of it. And I think right now, before I would feel comfortable making a recommendation of what that budget is to have a little more detailed conversation with the council at an upcoming study session or work meeting to kind of understand the scope of what it is we're really trying to do. And then we could work to come up with some numbers for that.
I think that would be very helpful if you came with a couple of parameters of cost and service that we could evaluate. We could probably give you a good indication of what our preference would be. But I just don't want this to fall through the cracks and be looking at a budget without the money in there at all.
I would agree, and we could do that at the next work meeting that you could put us on. We can take a quick look at that and give you some outer parameters of what we think would be reasonable from a workload standpoint and how much it would cost.
Okay. Two more quick questions, Ms. Ellsworth and then Mr. Shipley.
Yeah, I just would agree with George Handley that I'm eager to see the general plan executed efficiently, and there's obviously the desire to fund that. And I hope it's not, we'll have conversations about this in the future, but I hope it's not splintered, like we're kind of patchworking it, because that's what's got us into trouble in the past. But we'll talk about that another time.
Mr. Shipley.
Just wonder if there's any feedback or approval or anything you need from the council based on the COVID-19 federal funding that you've seen, the $750,000?
Yes. What our process now will be to HUD's developing some guidelines for us, and they're working quickly on that. We will then take it and need to go through a somewhat similar appropriation process that we do with our regular CDBG funds and home funds. And we'll take those recommendations to the administration and we'll figure out what we think are the best programs that we could do and some suggestions with that. And then we'll need council approval to appropriate those funds. And so I would be looking to be coming back to the council here in the near future. This is going to be, as you can imagine, with this money, people are really hurting out there. So we need to move as quickly as we possibly can as a department and as an administration with other departments, economic development, redevelopment, to come up with the most efficient and best use of those funds. And then we'll be back with the council to run that by you and get your approval for it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Gary. We appreciate your time. We're going to move on now to
thank you.
Item number 3, which is a presentation by the Development Services Department on their budget. This includes planning, building, economic development, redevelopment agency, and so on. And this will be presented by Bill Pepperoni, who is the Director of Development Services.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm here with David Walter and Keith Morey. I'll speak for a few minutes about development services, and then David will talk about Redevelopment Agency for a little bit, and Keith will talk about economic development. Because we're a new department, I thought it'd be helpful for us to talk for a minute about our organizational chart and the responsibilities that we cover in our department. Those in red at the top of the org chart are kind of administrative. Myself, Rachel Breen, the executive department secretary, and Na La, the planning secretary. Rachel and Na are both pretty new with the city, but are both doing just an outstanding job in keeping our department organized and on task. So they've been great additions to our department. In green is economic development and redevelopment. So there's Keith at the top and then Dave Walter. We have 2 open positions in that department right now. Those positions became open while we were searching for an economic development director. We thought it made the most sense to hire a new director and then let that person hire his own staff. So we've held off on doing that. I'll talk more about those positions, those vacant positions in a little bit. In blue is the building department. So Doug Fallon is our chief building official. Anna and Ellen are actually building inspectors, but they're in the office full time, doing administrative things to keep the building permits moving forward, tracking bonds and those types of things. James Anderson is our plans examiner. And then the 4 inspectors across the bottom, they are all certified building inspectors and they're all field inspectors. In our current work situation that we've been in, the field inspectors can pretty much work completely from their trucks. So they don't need to come into the office. They can receive the inspection requests on their tablets. They can perform the inspections on the tablets, and so they don't ever have to come into the office. In the kind of purple color is Brian Maxfield, our planning supervisor, and then the 3 planners we have within the development services department. They're all current planners, and that's our planning division. The boards and commissions that we're over include Planning Commission, Design Review Committee, Building Inspection Board of Reviews, Landmarks, and the Redevelopment Agency. As far as general plan goals and policies, next slide. Encourage design that focuses on activity and surveillance to avoid unwanted situations and visitors. Public safety as part of design review is always foremost in planning review, but not only is that a conscious effort we make, we've actually adopted design guidelines that reinforce those ideas or principles. That's why planning recently has kind of emphasized buildings being pulled out to the street, doors and windows being at street level, putting parking behind buildings instead of between a building and a street. All of that is to help encourage public safety. Encourage maximum build out in existing higher density areas like south of BYU and within the central business district. Those have been goals of the city for several years now, many years now. South of BYU campus, we have not had a new student housing project since we increased that parking ratio. Remember, Joaquin Village caused some parking problems. I was parked with a ratio of 0.7 parking spaces per. We raised that ratio to 0.8 per bed plus 0.2 per unit for visitor space. We haven't had a new project come in that area, so we can't tell how well the new ratio will be working. Newer downtown projects, which have their own ratio, like 200 City View and Liberty Center, seem to be working based on the ratios they were given. Now, the reason why I say seem to be working is that both of those projects either have legal on-street parking nearby, or in the case of 200 City View, there's a parking structure nearby. We don't know how many people who live in those buildings are using that free parking that's adjacent to their project. Liberty View, City View charges for their parking, for all parking. Liberty Center gives you one free space and then charges you for your second space. We just don't know how many of their residents are spilling over onto the free parking. So those projects seem to be working, but like I say, we don't really know how many people are parking elsewhere.
We have a question from Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, my question is, if we see an economic recession, will we see increased demand to lower our parking standards from developers? Developers will be hurting. They'll want to build more units and fewer parking stalls. Are we going to get even more pushback now if we head into a recession?
Well, we may, but as you know from being recently on the Planning Commission, in the last, seems like 6 or 8 months, most of the projects have asked for some type of parking reduction based on different criteria or different things that the ordinance allows. So we're already seeing those requests for parking reductions. Will we see more with an economic turndown? I would assume so, I would guess so. But I think we've got limitations within the ordinance that don't let you go below a certain floor. So I think with those limitations in place, we should be safe. But I guess we'll see, Shannon, as those projects come on. Next slide. Provide sufficient housing options for single professionals as a means to increase family occupancy in single family areas. So one of the areas that particularly targeted that goal was the Southeast Neighborhood Plan down on South State Street. Since that neighborhood plan was written that opened the door to this alternative housing, the Planning Commission and City Council have approved 571 dwelling units down there. We've got a project in the pipeline right now for another 100 or so. We haven't yet seen how that's translating to increasing family occupancy in other areas because none of those projects is occupied yet. The first ones are just now starting to finish buildings, but because we don't have finished buildings down there, we haven't seen if we're getting the desired result that we intended yet. Next slide. Encourage development patterns that reduce land development costs. So for years, we've had in place higher density zoning in downtown, south of BYU campus, the TOD, ITOD, and we have seen developments taking place in those areas. So I think that is helping to fill a goal. On the west side, you recently adopted some regulations that would stipulate how sewer connections would be granted out there. I think that's going to help encourage orderly growth and would discourage leapfrog type of development. The first of those projects asking for some of those connections is in our pipeline right now. We haven't had the rush on those 500 to 600 connections I thought we would have when those connections were made available. We have heard that the developers are actively trying to put ground under contract. Next slide. Identify criteria for properties with potential for multifamily and one-family housing. I think this has been one of the benefits of the neighborhood plans is that every neighborhood plan we have done so far has identified those areas. I've been pleased that none of the neighborhood plans we've done so far, none of those neighborhoods have said we've got enough of a certain type of housing and we're not taking anymore. So that's been gratifying to see as a member of the planning department and somebody who helps write those plans. But so far that's been happening in each of the neighborhood plans as they've taken place. Next slide. As a new department, we've written a mission statement, and based on the motivations that caused the formation of development services, we thought the initial mission statement should be to be transparent and predictable in all aspects of service we provide. Transparency and predictability were two of the main motivators for this department. I think the mission statement will probably change over time as we've accomplished certain things. But in order to achieve those goals, we've really emphasized 2 development reviews to identify all major issues on any project. It's very difficult for a developer to handle it when you're 4, 5, 6 reviews into a project, and then staff identifies something that's a deal breaker. Those types of issues need to be identified in the first 2 reviews. We've put a lot of emphasis on consistency in ordinance interpretation and application. That's both on the engineering side with our public works partners and on the planning side. Planning staff attends engineering staff meetings. Engineering staff attends planning staff meetings. We've revamped the way we do our coordinator review committee meetings. We've just put a lot of emphasis on the development reviews and in being consistent and predictable in our interpretation of ordinances. Accomplishments for the last year. we've accomplished quite a bit in terms of the one-stop shop. Up until recently, we've had an engineer, an engineering plan tech, a planner, and a zoning officer right in proximity to the front counter. Because of social distancing, we've broken that pattern, but we still have those people available at the front counter digitally. They're just not there in person. But having those people all ready at the front counter and ready to answer questions has been very helpful, particularly the engineering planning tech, Rachel Laurel, because a lot of times she's able to answer the engineering question, and she's allowed us to issue engineering permits from development services. Before, people got their permit or part of their permit issued at community development's front counter, and then they ran out to engineering to get other parts of it issued. Now we're doing all of that at the same front counter, and that's largely due to Rachel Laurel. So that's been extremely helpful. In the last year, we've issued 1,164 building permits. The Planning Commission heard 108 requests, Board of Adjustment 5 requests. And probably the biggest accomplishment of the Landmarks Committee has been the preservation of Amendonite Hall. That's been their biggest accomplishment, I would say, in the last several years. Landmarks Committee realized early on that if they wanted to save that very valuable asset, they needed to get involved and try to help encourage something to happen, not just sit back and wait and be reactive. And it was because Landmarks took a very proactive role in that we were able to save Amendonite Hall. Next slide. So these go to Dave Walter. He's going to take my place.
No, we have a question from Mr. Fillmore. Sorry. Mr. Fillmore, you might be muted. You're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bill, about 100 years ago, I spent 3 months of my life at Amanda Night Hall. And I'm just curious, what's the status on that effort?
It's on their next landmarks agenda to be put onto the city's local landmarks register. And it's on their agenda to be approved for the interior remodel for women's housing again. We're taking it back to be what it was originally, a women's dormitory. That's what it's going back to being. And those items are on the landmarks upcoming agenda. That's this month.
What is the predicted timing on that interior remodel?
I would imagine they'll start work this summer. Historic buildings always take longer than you would expect, and certainly longer than new construction. But I would think they would be open for, I'm sure they're going to hope to be open come September, October, that time frame.
Really? And it'll be used for residential purposes?
Yes, a ladies' dormitory.
Ladies, okay.
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
In regards to the actual budget needs of the department, we had one supplemental request that you recently heard that was shifting about $200,000 from community and neighborhoods over development services. Somehow in dividing the departments, community and neighborhoods got a bunch of the funding for building inspectors that are in development services. So that last supplemental request you heard was simply shifting that money from Gary's department to mine. It wasn't new money, it was just changing pockets. That was the last supplemental request you heard, and that was adequate and did just fine. Dave and Keith and I are talking right now about how to reduce the budget by 5%. We think that's a likely scenario with the budget, with the economic downturn that we've had. We think we're going to be able to achieve that, and we'll have some specific ideas we'll be presenting to the administration and then to the council in the coming weeks. There's nothing in the 2020 year budget I'd particularly like to talk to the council about, because I think our budget's adequate and we can make it work. Dave, you want to go on? Sure.
Good afternoon. So we've taken some of the goals that the council identified, and so we'd like to talk about a couple of them today. One was beautify and improve the gateways into the city. And so, as you know, we have a very limited number of gateways, and it would be nice to have those spruced and cleaned up. One of the things we're looking at is we're extending or creating a new project area at the mall. The mall occupies one project area in the Redevelopment Agency. We'd like to see about the possibility of expanding that, maybe taking into account of some of the things that are going on across the street and help clean that up. that would, we've seen Ross Dress for Less go in there. There's some other activity going on in that shopping center. It'd be nice to be able to have a funding source to help potentially encourage other development to happen in that corridor. We have started to look at the possibility of creating a new redevelopment project area that would run along Center Street from the freeway to 500 West. Much of our focus in the past has been in the downtown, rightfully so. We continue to look at that, but it would be nice to start looking at that stretch of Center Street that runs from the freeway to 500 West and see if we couldn't come up with some sort of funding source to be able to buy some of those homes as they become available. That way we can help that transition into more of a commercial corridor as we think it ultimately will become, coming from the freeway to the downtown. And we also want to see, encourage development, quality development along Lakeview Parkway as that grows and becomes an important corridor to the west side of the community. We're still very concerned about State Street, obviously, particularly in the south. We had an opportunity to talk with the Redevelopment Executive Committee today about that possibility. And so those are some of the areas that we're looking at to create and beautify those gateways into the city. Next slide, please. So determine the appropriate level, type, and location of economic development initiatives for Provo City. This is an area that redevelopment and economic development have worked very cooperatively in the past. We look forward to doing that in the future. We would continue to hold events, such as the CEO Summit and other activities where we can highlight Provo as a place to grow and succeed in your business. We look to adopt best practices throughout the development community. And as always, we were looking to diversify our job base so that we don't become too dependent on one type. And then once, for example, there are communities that heavily focus on retail, and if there's a retail collapse, they're more severely impacted. And so in order to avoid that, we are looking to diversify our job base. Duncan Aviation, I guess, would be a great example of that we're able to see them expand and they bring high quality jobs to the area. This one is revitalizing distressed commercial centers. We do work quite closely with several of the commercial centers in town. We'd like to continue to strengthen those relationships and see about talking, we have a great asset in downtown, and we have Downtown Provo Inc. Mr. Peterson is very, very active in that. We do target existing centers that are in project areas, such as the downtown, the mall. We're looking to create new redevelopment project areas for centers. An example of this is the Mix. So that went up on the market. We've been working with Westport Capital for a couple of years now, and we've created a new project area that would help provide sewer improvements that are not only going to help the Mix, but we're going to help other projects downstream of that. For the Parkway Center across the street, they do not get property tax increment, but they get sales tax increment. There was a deal done with them to help them provide an incentive to replace the Nicolita's Pizza that was removed as a result of the improvements that were done for the bus rail. Bus rapid transit. Thank you. And then finally, we'd like to continue to attend retail conferences where applicable to highlight Provo's attractiveness to new and expanding retail throughout the community. So, next slide, please. Promote the Central Business District. This is still a high priority item for the Redevelopment Agency. We do have an existing project area. There was one that expired, but there was another one that was placed in by the City Council in about 2013 that has several more years to go. So we work very closely with Downtown Provo Inc. As I mentioned, Mr. Peterson is a great asset. He's very well connected with that business community. And we would like to be more connected to the business and property owners in the downtown. So we are particularly cognizant of that now with COVID-19. We want to help all the businesses stay and continue to operate. We are working very hard to get information out to them as we get it in. This is a rapidly changing and very fluid and dynamic environment. People don't quite know where to go to, and so we're trying to do what we can to help not only the business owners, but the banking community, things that we can do to do that. We have an opportunity for the existing city center block. So this slide's a little outdated in that we are going to be issuing the RFQ for the site. I'm going to change that to a request for proposals and make a few changes, but that will be going out here shortly. And what we would like to do is to have, once our new city hall is built and we're able to move, is that we can demolish this existing building and engage more of Center Street and have a more stacked development where we have office or commercial on the ground floor and maybe some multifamily residences above that. We think that's going to harness the synergy in the downtown area and continue to be the success that we've had in the past. And we'd like to have discussions with various property owners about their vacancies and some potential tenant opportunities and what the agency and or city can do to help facilitate that. Next slide, please. Housing, quality housing services are certainly something that's important to the council and the community. So we are working to include workforce housing in new projects. I think that an example of that would be the Mill Race project. Excuse me. They're going to be adding some workforce units in their residential component if you lease or buy office space from them in their office tower. We're going to be creating a housing set-aside fund as a result of changes in the redevelopment law. Anytime that the city now adopts a new redevelopment project area and generates tax increment, 10% of that is going to be set aside for housing, express purpose of housing. So we will be creating a housing set-aside fund, and we'll be using that to leverage new housing that's going to be developing in the community, where we'll be able to provide some incentives to help potentially densify projects or make it more feasible. Next slide, please. And with that, I will, if you have no questions, I'll turn it over to Keith.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, you guys. I appreciate you taking time to talk with us. As David and Bill have already mentioned, we tried to, I tried to pick some slides that are representative of the council's goals and objectives. And hopefully what we're doing is in line with your thoughts and your vision for the community. I'll just say, up front, that it's not every day that you start a job and kind of have your job description changed overnight. And I've been doing economic development in the state for a long time, and everybody knows what economic development is, but pretty much overnight, because of the COVID virus, we're not really focused so much on business recruiting as much as we are on business survival and business retention. So a lot of these slides are very relevant to the council's goals and objectives, but they're really affected by a lot of stuff that's going on in the marketplace right now. There's a lot of information coming from a lot of sources. I probably spend most of every day in at least 2 to 3 meetings with the Economic Development Corporation of Utah, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, the Salt Lake Chamber, the University of Utah, and some of the new training that they're doing. Just trying to collect information. We tried to be very proactive up front and created a sub-page on the city's economic development page to provide COVID-19 resources as we see them and to keep those constantly updated. Quinn and I partnered together and put together a downtown Provo Facebook page, and we've been communicating on that, all the information that we're seeing. And David was very helpful in putting together a list of all the businesses that we have through our business license department. And we did a mass mailing to all of them about information, our sympathies to them, our desire to be connected with them and helpful in any way that's appropriate, and directing them to our site for updated information. And then, as David already mentioned, he sent out another email today to the banking institutions, just making sure that we have a good connection with them and offering our services if we can help them. So hopefully we're staying on top of that, but it's definitely a dynamic situation. So this first one, revitalize blighted, dilapidated neighborhoods and distressed commercial centers. When I was interviewed, that was one of the questions that I was asked was, there's a lot of focus on retail, but what are we doing to make some of that more available in our neighborhoods? So we've been working on that. Some of the historic things that have been done the purchase of the IFA property, I think, is a great example of our efforts to take existing property and retool it to a better use, and that's coming along really well. And I've been working with the planners to try to identify possible neighborhoods, or maybe a neighborhood market or something like that might be advantageous, or certain neighborhood areas that ought to be redeveloped. Next slide, please. Retain, support our established businesses and talent. I mean, that's a crucial one. And I think all of you know, Provo has been a great launch point for many businesses historically. Unfortunately, sometimes those reach a point where they don't have what they need in Provo, or for some reason they leave. And so we're trying to the second bullet point, identify who those companies are and why they've left, and are there missed opportunities that we can capitalize to try to keep them here. It's kind of timely as part of our response to the COVID-19. We didn't really have a good, effective database of businesses that we could rely on. And so David's been very instrumental in, like I said, in sending that email out to all the businesses, and hopefully that begins to create a database that we can utilize to establish connections with those businesses and continue our outreach efforts to them and improve them. Next one, promote the airport. And I think all of you know that that's an incredible asset to us. Before this kind of virus clamped down, David and I went out and met with Duncan Aviation, had a fantastic tour of their facility and their expansion plans. One of the things that came out of that meeting was their concern that anybody that's coming to their facility from internationally first has to go through Salt Lake Airport and go through customs there and then fly again to Provo. And so I reached out to some connections I have with the state, with the governor's office, and with the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. Colby Cooley, who actually works for EDCU, had a connection with the Salt Lake Airport. And it turns out that Salt Lake Airport, even though they're expanding, feels that they're at capacity. And so any opportunity to create a diversion from their airport to other airports, they're very supportive of. And so they've been very helpful in trying to help us identify what we would have to do and who the main contacts are to get our own customs department at the Provo airport. And I think things like that and identifying barriers to using Provo as an alternative airport site are critical, and we're going to continue to work on those because that's a key asset to us. Next. Draw new cultural activities in the downtown area. I was going to talk about the tour of Utah, the bike race that was coming through in August. Unfortunately, that's been canceled because of the virus. Those types of opportunities are critical. And as we start to resurface out of this, one of the things I've already begun talking to the administration and the mayor about is, from my perspective, we already ought to be planning the coming out party for when everybody wants to come out. And what that looks like and how as a city we can capitalize on that to facilitate it to the extent we can do that in the downtown area or have aspects of it in the downtown area and try to regenerate energy for those businesses that have struggled. I think that'll be critical. So we may have lost the tour of Utah and there may be a period of time where we struggle over the upcoming weeks, but hopefully there'll be some new opportunities where we can get people back out and we can start to resurface out of this. So working with downtown Provo to identify things like replacements for the rooftop concert series are going to be critical, and we're committed to continue to try to do that. And I think that may be the last slide. Is there another one? Yep. So I don't know if you have any questions for me, but I'd be happy to ask or answer anything you have.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're a little bit over time, but if it's time for a quick question. No questions?
Maybe I just would ask one question for favor of you guys. We've been directing people to our site, but each of you have a lot of your own individual connections with businesses and with friends and neighbors. And I just would encourage you to do your part to reach out to them. And if there are businesses that you know of that are struggling that we can help, connect us and let us know. And if they need help, direct them to our site, and we'll do everything that we can to try to help.
Thank you very much. I think that's important. Mr. Harding, quick question. Mr. Harding?
Oh, is there a question?
I don't know if you can hear me. I am having some difficulties.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We can hear you. Maybe he can't hear us. Okay. Mr. Fillmore, yes.
I guess I do have a question for Keith.
Yes.
What specifically is the city doing or planning on doing to help small businesses here in the city access the federal state funds available for small business loans?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. We've got all those connections and links on our economic development site, and those are changing. The information is changing pretty regularly, so we keep those updated as quickly as we can. But as an example, I was participating in a very large networking meeting this morning and had some businesses ask some specific questions. They had already begun the application process for the Paycheck Protection Plan, but had questions about how the forgivable loan process worked and under what circumstances those loans might not be forgiven. So I tried to answer what I could, and then kind of reached an end and was able to reach out and got some connections through the state. The governor's office has created a rapid response team. So for small businesses like that can't get the answer or the help that they need from their bank or from someone else, there's that rapid response team. You can go to their site, you can enter their form, and they have experts on hand that can either give you the answer to the questions or direct you to who can give you the answers to your questions. So, I mean, it's those kinds of things that we're trying to do, because really, I mean, let me just be frank. I think it's outstanding that Salt Lake City was able to put up $1 million to try to help their local businesses. From my perspective, I don't know how much of that money is actually going to save anybody. But I think it was the effort that showed the partnership of the city with the local business community. And I think that's what we're committed to. How can we provide the kind of support that they need to get to the resources that really can make a difference so that they have the highest opportunity for success and to survive through this. We're trying to champion the local businesses and get as much information out as we can about restaurants that are still providing takeout. And so we've partnered with Explore Utah to have those connections, those links on our site as well, so that people know that they need to do that. We just had Bajio open in Riverwoods. I went out and met with one of the owners and got a picture of his grand opening on our Instagram page, just so that we're trying to get that kind of word out. And I mean, I think those kinds of things will make a difference. And then a lot of this, you know, what your Gary, mentioned the CDBG funds, how those are going to be available or what those can be utilized. Nobody really knows yet, but hopefully we'll know pretty soon. And maybe there are some things we can do with that. The mayor has been very supportive about working with all the departments to create kind of an atmosphere of, let's stop thinking as government, but what can we do in our own departments to create opportunities to show the businesses that we're trying to help. I mean, for an example, the police chief responded to her and said, you know, we can defer our alarm fee for a while for some of these businesses. And although that's not going to save a business, I think those are things that we can do that make sense, that show that we're right there with you trying to do what we can. And I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. Hopefully it does.
No, I appreciate all that and encourage that. My concern is I'm very much aware that some of the local banks are stumbling out of the gates. They're a little slow to ramp up and assist local businesses to get access to this federal loans.
No, I understand 100%. You know,
Maury, we're well over time. I'm wondering if we're going to have to move on here.
George, the only thing I wanted to mention was this. If there was a way that we could really publicize to our local businesses as soon as possible the accessibility of this state rapid response team, just get the word out quickly, because those funds won't be there forever.
No, I agree. I put that on our site and on the Downtown Provo Facebook page today. And, you know, and I just have encouraged everybody that has any connection with any business to get that information out. And if they've got a question, call us. I mean, we'll get them where we need. I mean, I didn't have the exact answer that I wanted, so I called EDCU and said, who's the right person? And they said, you know, if you can't get the answer that you want from the rapid response team, then Colby Cooley in our office is the Paycheck Protection Plan expert in our office. Call him. So, I mean, I think we've got people that we can connect them to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Keith.
I know this is an important topic, and we'll please count on the council for any support that you feel like we can offer in this regard.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on. Thank you to all three of you for your presentations, for all the good work you do. We'll move on to item number 4. We're 15 minutes behind. Mr. Borgett, Director of Administrative Services, will make a presentation by Administrative Services.
Okay.
I'm not asking you to cut off 15 minutes of your time, but I'm just letting everyone know that we're behind, and we haven't had a whole lot of time for questions, and yet we have them. So we may have to curtail the questions and have counselors follow up individually if necessary. But any efficiency you can help us with, that's appreciated.
Okay. Thank you, Council Chair Handley. So we made a presentation on March 10th for Human Resources and Finance. Today, we're going to be covering the Justice Court, our recorder, facilities, an overview of the city debt, and our Information Systems Division. I just want to introduce, we're going to have Rhiannon Newton, who's our court administrator, who will talk about the Justice Court. Then we'll have Amanda Erkenbrack, who will discuss the Recorder's Office, and then Dick Blackham, facilities, and then Dan Follett's going to provide an overview of the city debt, and then we'll conclude with Josh Eyrig. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Rhiannon.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just start off with, I'm just going to quickly hit the bullet points. I don't feel like I need a lot of your time, but I was asked to, if we were asked to recommend a department budget cut of 5% because of the upcoming economic downturn, how I would do that. I would have to look at our current budget, and first off, I would want to look at all of our budget line items and see if there's anywhere there we could tighten up. From there, I would look at services provided and procedures we have in place, determine whether they're essential or if there's a more efficient or cost-effective way to accomplish them. And from there, I would have to look at what positions would be impacted and also how our level of service would be affected. So I don't have any specific recommendations right now, but that's how I would go about finding some. The next thing is, what is your division doing to help the city achieve the goals listed in the general plan implementation section? So we have currently 2 full-time employees. So to address that in 7.4.7, we have 2 full-time employees on staff that speak both English and Spanish. We also have court-appointed interpreters that are provided for all hearings, criminal, traffic, and small claims in any language requested or needed. And also, it's kind of the same section 7.4.3. We are open and very receptive to citizens that come into the Justice Court. I'm sure you've heard that we do an annual customer service survey and have repeatedly received high scores on that, which in the type of business we are dealing with is pretty commendable. I have a great staff here, and we are very customer service focused. We also touch on that through our employee recognition program and recognize employees that are actually giving outstanding service to the customers. The other bullet point, are there goals or objectives in the general plan where you feel like you could do more if given more budget? And if so, what are they? I don't have anything right now that I feel like is lacking. I think we are running pretty efficiently. The next one, do you see important needs being unfunded or underfunded in your department currently? I would say no. If you needed, or if you received supplemental money last year, what did you do with those dollars? We didn't receive any supplemental money last year. And then the last one, are there any requests related to the fiscal year 2021 budget you'd like to bring before the council? And we have submitted a supplemental request this year for $7,000. This would be an ongoing expense, and it would cover judicial service costs, which would be substitute or temporary judges that could fill in when Judge Romney is on vacation or at conferences or basically out of the office. Our caseload is significantly larger than Judge Romney handles like 1.25 caseload of 1.25 judges. This would just help us from pushing things out when he does take time off or has conferences he has to attend to. That is all I have. If you have any questions.
No, I don't see any questions. So thank you very much, Rhiannon.
Thank you.
Hi, Council. It's great to see everyone. Just to go over, we'll start with the hard question first. If I had to recommend a 5% decrease in my budget, Training and travel would be the first to go. Anything beyond that would really impact personnel, which would impact our service levels, our ability to respond to a grammar request. It would make it really difficult to do what we're doing today. So training and travel would be the first to go. Some of the things we're doing to help meet the goals of the general plan. I feel like we provide great customer service. I want businesses in our community to feel like we're easy to work with. So when we get grammar requests, we try to make the process as easy as possible. In addition to that, we have currently a 3-day average turnaround time on our grammar requests, which is great. We're required to respond within 10 days. We're doing it within 3. So I feel like we're building trust within our community, and we're doing a really great job as far as that goes. Another thing that we're doing to kind of raise awareness of our local history and some of the fun things about Provo is that we are working with the state archives to transfer some of our records, digitize them, make them available on the internet. And it's also in conjunction as an effort to kind of clear out the vault before we move into our new building. So we've been working hard on that. Janine in my office is currently working on that almost the entire time she's in there. She's scanning documents, she's preparing them to be sent to the archives. So we're really focusing on that. We want to make these records available to the public. That's something that's really important to us. And then also another thing that we're doing is a lot of these records and photographs and oaths of office and election records, we're making available online. So if you ever have a chance, visit documents.provo.org. And we have a lot of information that's available out there that hopefully citizens can go to and reference that instead of needing to make a grammar request. Right now, I don't see anything that's underfunded. We didn't have any supplemental requests last year, and I don't see the need for any this year. And with that, I believe that's everything. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions? All right, I don't see any, so we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, Council. I appreciate the chance to be here with you today. As far as the facility services update goes, look at possible reductions of our budget. We currently have a a part-time position that is unfilled. I would recommend that we not fill that, and I think that would save us some funds toward possible cuts. Also, we could forego our uniform budget for this year and possibly next year, so I think that would help a bit as well. Any additional cuts that we would propose would probably require a decrease in service levels that I think would impact our maintenance program, our preventive maintenance on our buildings and our critical systems. So hopefully we wouldn't have to go quite that far. Next item is the city general plan goals. 5.4.7, improve energy efficiency in Provo and reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. Back in November, I think you're all aware, 2018, we submitted an application for the part of the Volkswagen funding to get some money to put toward new electric vehicle charging stations. That grant was, that application was approved. The approved amount was $267,000, a little over $267,000. The installation process has started back in October and is moving along very well. What we have planned for the EV stations is there'll be 4 new units at the new city center property, and that'll be later this year in September. Over at the rec center, we're going to add 4 new stations, 4 new dual units, which is 8 spots. So each one of these counts are dual units for, they would provide charging for 2 parking spots. Rec center, they're looking at June, having their installation completed, the contractor is. Over at the Academy Library, we're going to add 2 additional units. I had listed here for May, and I just got an email yesterday and checked it out, and they've completed those 2 new units at the library already. So this contractor that that won the bid through the RFP is doing a great job, and they're moving along really well. Down at Public Works, we're adding 2 new units, and that is completed the last couple of weeks. They're up and running. Over at Provo Power, we're going to add 2 new units, and that'll be done right around June of this year. Up at Rock Canyon Park, there's 2 new units that are already installed and operating. I have listed North Park, but those 2 units are included in the rec center. So due to the new interactive playground on the west side of the rec center in North Park, that took a lot of that parking along that east side of the park. So we've added those units to the rec center. So they'll be along the rec center on the east side as well. Over at Pioneer Park, there's 2 units. It'll be finished in July of this year. And then up at Spring Creek out on South State, the new park, 2 units have been completed and installed there. So this is a really exciting project. It's moving along very well. All these locations that we picked in the application process are along major highways and corridors that the state asked us to look at doing and strategically placing them around the city. So help Provo reach a real good goal of promoting energy efficiency, and also in line with Governor Herbert's promotion of EV charging stations throughout Utah. Second item is, again, all of you are well aware of our major construction project with the new public safety and city hall building, as well as our new fire station. And we're designing these units to meet a high standard for energy efficiency, and looking towards sustainable building principles as well. They'll reflect creative design, community involvement, and cost consciousness. We're working with VCBO, again, as you're well aware, and they're doing a great job with Layton Construction, our general contractor. It's going real well. Fire Station 1 is progressing very, very well. We're all very pleased with the progress. I know Chief Miguel has been key in our construction team and meeting with us every week, and things are going very well up there. We're looking forward to a July 2020 grand opening and moving in there. So that's very exciting. As far as the public safety building and the city center on our property here at the existing city hall, the building design is finished. We have several bid packages out already and been issued to subcontractors. And again, it's moving along very well. Portion of this, we're gonna start with putting up temporary fencing next week on April 14th, and starting to close off that west area of the block there, and starting to move. And I know the mayor and Nicole Martin are looking at some type of video for a groundbreaking, since we can't get together and participate in that all together. So anyway, these are exciting projects, and they're moving along very well. Next item is, if I've given more budget in the plan, I am concerned about some additional training for my maintenance technicians when the new city center comes online and the new buildings. These systems are going to be much more advanced and a higher state-of-the-art technology, and I have a real concern that I can get the guys trained up and up to speed. So if there's any possibility, I could look at new training for HVAC controls and some electrical training for them guys. That would be worth, I think, looking into. Any other important needs being unfunded or underfunded? No, I don't have any at this point. Supplemental requests, didn't receive any last year and have no plans to for this year. And any other requests, that I don't have any at this time. So that's my division updates, and I appreciate being here, and I'm be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Blackham. Any questions? Okay, no questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Who's next?
This is Dan Follett. I'm sitting in front of John Borgett's computer, so it says John Borgett, but John's much better looking than me, so you'll probably be able to figure out it's me. So there is a slide that shows the debt. I don't know if that's available or not that we could bring up on the screen. There it is. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to meet with you and just go through kind of an overview of the debt that's outstanding. This is long-term debt at Provo City. If you look at the column on the left with the descriptions, it's broken out into the same categories that you'll see in the CAFR, in the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report that you receive each year. And in fact, we've used June 30th, 2019 numbers because those numbers tie to those audited numbers that you'll see in that report. So if you get questions from constituents or others, it ties back to what you've seen in that report. Because we're 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year, in most cases, the principal balance has been paid down some during that period of time. Again, the first column on the left is the description, and the description generally describes what it was used for, the year that it was issued. And so if we start on the top one, it's general obligation 2011 rec center bond. And those were the bonds that were issued back in 2011 to build the rec center. Immediately below that, you see a general obligation refunding bond series 2017. What that is the advanced refunding of the 2011 rec center bonds. And what we mean by advanced is we're not, there's generally a call feature associated with bonds. And with most bonds, that call feature is 10 years out. In other words, we cannot call those bonds or pay those bonds off early or refund or refinance those bonds for the first 10 years. There used to be a feature in the Internal Revenue Code that allowed for advanced refundings. We took advantage of that feature prior to it going away with the last major tax act that was passed, and we did an advanced refunding. The effect of that advanced refunding is that it saved the property taxpayers who actually pay a property tax levy and is the source of funding for the payment on these bonds. It actually saved them $2,820,000 over the life of the bond, and that's a direct savings to the taxpayers. And so that's what the second bond is there. The third bond is the GEO City Facilities Bond that was issued in 2019 to build the new city facilities, both public safety, city center, and fire station number 2 that's under construction. The next bond is a telecom 2004 sales tax bonds. Those were the bonds that were issued to build the fiber network that was ultimately sold to Google. And then finally, under that category is the 2014 cemetery bonds that were issued to expand the cemetery. Then there's a note payable for the sports park that was issued in 2019. This is a note payable to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have already made one payment on it of $300,000, and the next payment will be due here in the next quarter. Then we have 3 capital leases. The first one was issued for $5.5 million initially. It funds the Provo 360 project. And then the next 2 leases, capital leases, are to fund the purchase of fire apparatus. Both have bought 2 fire trucks, essentially. And those are, again, capital leases. Moving down to the business type activities, the revenue bonds, we issued stormwater bonds in 2010 to fund stormwater improvements, water revenue bonds in 2015 for water improvements, primarily 2 storage tanks, wastewater revenue bonds in 2015, and energy system revenue bonds in 2015. The energy system revenue bonds were used to build the new energy building. And then we've also issued sales tax revenue bonds related to improvements that have been done at the airport that support Duncan Aviation and other providers in the future. And so in total, the city, as of June 30th, 2019, had $164,574,399 of debt outstanding. You can see that the annual payment related to that debt is about $17 million a year. One thing that I would note, as I mentioned, we did an advance refunding of the rec center bonds, and so until those bonds are paid off as of January 1, 2021, we continue to make a payment on the old bond and then a partial payment on the new bond. The sum of those amount to about $3.1 million. Starting in 2021, that will drop to the $2,950,000, and the difference, of course, represents the savings to the taxpayers going forward. Then you can see the all-in combined interest rates for each of the issuances there. You can see for the refunded bonds, we moved from a total interest cost of 4.2% and dropped it to 2.32%. As you move down, you can see the telecom bonds there at 5.16%. The reason that they're higher is that that's a taxable issuance as opposed to a tax-exempt issuance. The difference being, of course, that to the investor in the bonds, if it's tax-exempt and they're a Utah resident, they don't pay tax on the interest income they earn for either federal or state purposes. If they happen to live in a state other than Utah that has an income tax, they likely do pay tax on the state portion of that.
Dan, we have a question from Mr. Sewell.
Yes.
Yes, Dan, I was just wondering if there's any possibility of saving some money by refinancing that telecom bond.
So if you go to the column that says call date or call feature, it shows the earliest date that we could potentially refund any of the issuances that are out there. The challenge with the telecom bond is it was issued as a taxable bond, and it was issued with what's known as a make-whole provision. And at the time, that actually, it helps to market the bonds, and it reduced the interest rate on the bonds at the time. But what a make-whole provision is essentially it makes the investor whole if we refund the bond early. And what that means is we essentially would have to pay the investor the net present value of future interest payments throughout the term of the bonds in order to refinance that early. And so because of that, it doesn't and probably will never make financial sense to refund that bond at a date earlier than its final maturity date. The good news is that we're getting towards the end of that bond. It was a 20-year issuance, and the final maturity date is February 15th, 2026.
Thank you.
And so I think as we go across, I put the repayment term of the bonds, the final maturity date, the payment funding source, we've listed there, the various sources that are utilized to make the annual payments on those bonds. Again, the call feature we talked about, and then the tax status we talked about. Most of what we have is tax exempt, which means we pay a lower interest rate ultimately. And again, we have a couple of issuances. The telecom bonds were taxable, and also the stormwater 2010, they're called Build America bonds, and they receive a federal subsidy. And because they receive a federal subsidy, they were not eligible to be tax exempt. And then finally, I would mention this. One of the areas that makes a significant difference in terms of what we pay to borrow money at Provo City is the ratings that Provo City has. And as you can see over on the right-hand side, we're rated by 3 rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. And you can see there that all of the ratings are AA or higher, AA minus or higher. And what that means is that all of the ratings are considered to be investment grade paper, and they are rated at prime or high grade. AAA is prime, and high grade is AA minus or higher, and that translates into lower interest rates. And one of the things they look at is they look very closely at the overall management of the city, how we set rates throughout the city, the property tax base throughout the city, and how the city's managed. But they also look at what fund balances are and the level of fund balances that we maintain in the various funds, and that plays a significant role in those ratings also. As you can see there, we have a AAA rating for the sales tax bonds and AA minus or better ratings for all of the other bonds. The challenge for Provo City is in terms of trying to become a AAA rated city across the board is really the population and the diversification of the city. Generally, cities that are a little bit larger in population are the ones that have AAA ratings. I think the only city in Utah that has a AAA rating is Salt Lake City. The other challenge we have is that we have a large student population, and so our per capita income tends to be a little bit lower than average, even though we try to point out to the rating agencies that is a temporary or transitional condition for many of the students, and that some of those students actually go on and create multi-billion-dollar businesses in our community. So,
Dan, we only have 2 more minutes for this whole portion. I don't know if you're almost done.
If there, that's all I have. I would be happy to answer any questions at a later date if the council has them, or if there are any questions now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we should have Josh Heirig to talk about information systems.
Okay, we're over time as you know, but even with the 15 minutes we've lost, we only have 2 more minutes left in your presentation. I don't know if you're going to be able to finish quickly.
That is definitely a rough run. I can attempt if you guys would like, or happily reschedule the IT portion. How would you guys like to proceed?
How much time do you think you need?
About 5 at least.
Mr. Hanley?
I can try to speed run and just see where the council wants me to hit.
Mr. Hanley, this is Cliff Strachan. I'm happy to give him 5 minutes of my time at the end of the meeting so he can take it now.
All right. If you can take 5 minutes, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm going to speed run. And so part of this ability to speed run is I did provide the council with a full annual report for IT operations. So most of what I'm going to be talking about is within a full write-up that is available to each of you. If you pass me or just this next slide. There we go. Next resource is a service catalog. We're unable to give a copy to this because it is a confidential resource, but this is a resource to you as council members if you would like to go into a closed session. This is where we can talk about all services that IT provides. Next slide. We also have the IS strategy published online that all council members are welcome to download, peruse, and provide input back to the IT department. We do want our strategy to be in alignment with all goals set by the council and the administration. Next slide. So going through the quick questions, your first question is related to what we're doing. So next slide. First off, all of the sections I know just kind of tie up for IT. Everything we do is obviously in support of all the departments. So all of those obviously fit right in as IT provides services to those. Safety is one of the areas that we do have obviously a direct impact to. And a lot of these projects that you see listed there tie directly to safety. Next slide. You can see this skip here going pretty quick, right? Sustainability is another key indicator that I see in those areas of the goals and objectives of the city. One of the big areas, we did go live with City View last year, and one of those was a 64% online adoption rate. So majority of all permits and inspections and other requests are now occurring fully online. Next slide. Innovation and business friendly, Provo 360, digital inclusion, other areas directly tie in. We are working currently on creating dashboards and giving insights into the business intelligence of the data throughout the Provo 360 project. Next slide. Digital inclusion, IT is heavily involved with this with a computer donation program with all of our partners, United Way and 10, 15 others. I'd happily provide the full list of those memberships to the council. One of our most recent accomplishments, we donated well over 42 rebuilt and repurposed computers to families in need within the Provo area so they can do work from home or other activities. Next slide. And then last but not least, communication, information sharing. Obviously, everything we do in IT related to whether it's radios or email or our mapping services are all directly aligned within information sharing to Provo's residents and business units. Next slide. Goals and objectives. Next slide. Could we do more? Obviously. I'll just leave it at that. Everything that you're hearing out there, in fact, even you guys using a lot of these remote workforce items are IT related. So when other areas are reducing costs, sometimes those impact us, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. Next slide. Received supplemental money. Next slide. We did receive supplemental money, and we're very appreciative. The council greatly supported us. We identified where the main needs were. One of those was communications resource, and we would not have been able to respond to the COVID emergencies and our workforce moving to telework without this resource. Next slide. Public safety, again, same kind of concept. We would not have been able to get our officers ready with some of their new areas, moving records to remote or doing the projects we have out there. One of the big areas of accomplishments, this is the one area that we have 100% resourcing for all critical public safety infrastructure to meet their needs 24/7. So we're very thankful to the council for approving that. So unfunded or underfunded, next slide. We issue a survey out every quarter, and in that survey, we ask a couple questions, and I'll let you guys kind of go through that on your time. So this is next slide, and I'll talk about the results. This last year, we did see a dip in our recent survey thing, so we did look a little further. Next slide. And we found in their comments, they were pretty consistent with highlighting that there is a little bit more dissatisfaction than there has been before related to our ability to respond to their needs. Next slide. And as you see is our projects number completed, number of systems going to service, and customer facing services all increased at a pretty heavy clip over these past years. So we're providing a lot more services with resources. So next slide. In each of those services, as you can imagine, increase the support needs. So we have significant increases to our help desk call center, which we then turn around and provide services. We are thankful that we're still able to meet a 3-day average close days. But we definitely see that in the future as being unable to respond to those needs in that same time frame. Next slide. So the next step we looked at is why are we unable to meet those? And we started classifying all the services we provide. If you can imagine a typical job that takes 40 hours to perform, if you only have 20 hours to perform those jobs, you start missing doing certain things. So in certain areas, if we're in the red zone, we stop doing patches or preventative maintenance, which increases the risk for the city. Next slide. And so this is just a high-level overview, and as you can see, a fairly large percentage of the services we deliver to our customers internally and externally are operating at a fairly high risk. So we do have correctives, and the options are typically to either A, add support resources, B, remove services, or C, accept the risks, which is the default stance. Next slide. So when we look at that also and evaluate how are we spending money in comparison to other cities around us, you can see that we are spending on average per employee less than those that are right around us. And I have a bunch of other details in the materials that are provided to you looking at other metrics in other cities besides just those that we directly compare to locally. Next slide. Are there other requests related to the budget you'd like to bring forth, council? Next. So these are the supplementals we anticipate putting in. The number one on the list right now, as you can imagine, Office 365 and having a remote collaborative platform, which is a standard across the city, would definitely be one of those areas. Each of these are detailed in the report that is provided to the council members. So we'd love to hear your input and direction on where you think the best answers are that are in that section. Next slide. And that is the speed version. So if there's any areas there that the council members would like me to go into more detail, I'm happy to do so at this time. And hopefully that met your needs for speed.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Any questions for Josh or any of the other presenters? We thank you very much for all of that information. We're going to take a quick break. I'm gonna just start up at 4:20. So whether you're back or not, but we can't. We're already over time, and I'll just add one quick thought that I know has been on the minds of several council members, that maybe John Borgett and Wayne and others can be helping us to think about it as we move forward with budget issues. But given the possibility that our budget may very well be reduced by more than 5%, we would love your thoughts and recommendations as we move forward in terms of how that might be addressed overall. That's quite a large, complicated question, but let's take a quick break and we'll start again in 4 minutes. We do?
Yeah, you have 4 of the 7, so that's a quorum.
All right. Well, let's get started then. All right, we're moving on to item number 5, which is a presentation by the Provo Energy Department. This will be given by Travis Ball, Director of Energy. Take it away.
I still can't start the video. I guess the host needs to let me in.
Let me do that for you, Travis.
Okay.
Now you have permission to do it.
Okay. There we go. All right. In the interest of time, we will cruise through this. So I had planned on doing some things on our strategic plan, but I did give you some handouts and you can read through the strategic plan. I'll just skip through that for now. And if there's any questions, frankly, can you go to the next slide, John? You've seen this in the past for those who have been on the council for a while, but we've always had this goal of being the most reliable power country while providing a safe environment for the employees in the country. We thought we needed to update the strategic plan, so we did that last year. And I sent that to Cliff, and hopefully he sent that to all the council. And you can go through that, our strategic plan, and I will skip through that portion of my program, and we'll get through this a little bit quicker. So can you go to the next slide and skip through the next few slides, John? Farther, all the way down to, I believe, reliability. Farther, next. Oh, right there, one up. All right, so to do the strategic plan, we came up with some projects because we want to be a energy provider for the city, a reliable energy provider. So these are some of the CIP projects that we're doing next year. The one is called the Mountain Vista Substation, which is a new substation down in the southeast portion of the city. We are also doing, did the presentation go away? I lost the presentation somewhere.
John, oh yeah, here it comes back.
Okay. All right, there we go. That's a new substation. That's about a $4 million expenditure. The SCADA upgrades, we are updating the software. So we have a really good SCADA program, but we need to make sure that we're keeping it in compliance. So we're doing some upgrades there. And then some miscellaneous city projects. One of the biggest is getting a redundant feed into the airport. So right now we feed the airport from a north feed. We'll be able to take that from the south feed. And the reason why we're able to do that is by completing that Mountain Vista substation. That gives us extra capacity on a substation to feed the west side. So it's an important CIP project to finish, just so we have enough capacity to feed those on the west side of town. Next slide. As if you've ever come to our energy board, we look at metrics for every month. And so these are some of the things that we take responsibility for. If you look down at the one of the things, responsible government, you'll see our fund balance, our rate stabilization fund. We have a goal of keeping over 25 million. Right now we're sitting around 29 million and a fund balance of about 37 million. So I know that there's been some talk about some loans to the airport, and I think with where we are right now, I think we have the funds to make that happen. Next slide. We also have additional services that we provide to the city, some conservation, rebates, street lights. So let's go to the next slide. One of the things that we tried to do when we built this building, and we've talked about this several times, we wanted to be a good example. So we did a LEED Gold energy building. We put solar on our rooftops. We've been a proponent of hybrid vehicles, free public charging stations, and I think Dick probably talked about some more that we're putting in the city. And we also just recently signed a huge solar contract for the city, about 80 megawatts. Next slide. The interesting thing about that is, even without the solar, the new solar coming on the system, if you look at where we were in F19 to F21, we've gone from a 56% coal utility to a 34%, and that's only going to go down when we get the solar online in the next year. Next slide. The other thing we talked about and we've discussed is our program where we encourage conservation. In the last since 2012, we've been self-funding this program. We've given over 9,000 incentives to customers of Provo at over $1.3 million. But over the last 2 years, we've seen a big drop in that program. And so with UMPA, we're going to provide a different program where we're looking at improving the air quality in the valley by encouraging those to people who use motors for their lawnmowers, snow blowers, etc. We want to encourage them to get a battery operated one, and we think that'll be a good program to do. And we have about $160,000 in for that program. Next slide. We also, a very important part of our city is taking care of the streetlights. We have 6,000 of them that we maintain all the time to make sure that they're on. We try to turn out anybody that turns in a light that's not working. We try to get that fixed within a 2-week period. Next slide. One of the most important things we do in the city is take care of the trees. We have thousands of trees that we maintain. By pruning these trees, we make sure that we have a reliable system. It's another very important part of the Energy Department. Next slide. The transfer to the general fund, we got in our budget a transfer of about $7.4 million to the general fund with an additional $3.6 million chargebacks. That gives the city, with all of our transfers, about a 19% return on investment. And I would say, if you could ever get a return on investment, personally, that's a pretty good investment. I'd have to say. Next slide. Now we're to the budget. As you might imagine, I think George said it, we're in a time that we don't quite understand what's going to happen in this new fiscal year. So we did some major cuts in our budget. I'll talk about the revenues and expenditures if you want to go to the next slide. The rate comparison, you've probably seen this before. We're in about the middle, so skip the next comparison slides, John. And the next one. On the revenue, we decreased our revenue budget by $4.5 million. We thought we're going to have some issues with revenue on the commercial side, so we decreased that by 10%. We decreased our residential revenues by 1% and our industrial customer by 2%. So that's a major hit on our budget. So we had to go through, and we also had to cut our expenditures to provide a balanced budget. So can you go to the next slide? Our O&M expenditures, we decreased by over $2 million. Now our CIP expenditures, we are increasing. That has to do with some of the money we're using for the new substations. But if we start seeing that we're not getting the revenue, even that we budgeted, some of our CIP expenditures can be either delayed a year or 2 years. So it's pretty easy for us to cut doing some of these projects by moving them out a year. Since we've been staying current on our CIP, I don't think that's going to hurt us. We'll still have the capacity to feed any new construction that comes to us. So for a total decrease, if you take the CIP, we have a total decrease of $713,000. And if you go to the next slide, you will see that if you compare our revenues to our expenditures, we are still providing a budget surplus of $150,000. So, is there any questions?
Any questions for Travis? Wow, that was lightning fast.
Hey, I knew you were behind. I wanted to get you back on, George.
Mr. Fillmore.
I think I didn't hear. Is it?
Yeah, he's unmuting.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. I don't have anything by way of question, just by way of congratulations. I think the city is exceptionally well served by the Energy Department, having been run in such a great, tight, and progressive way. Not only are we reducing pollution, but we're doing so ever more efficiently on the dollar and cents side. And we're fortunate
I would have to,
Travis.
I would have to say that's an amazing thing. If you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said there's no way that could be possible. But I do have to give credit where it's due. UMPA has been very progressive. I think that comes from you as a council. You as a council have pushed some of the new resources. They've been very willing to do some of the things we say. I would have to give a lot of credit to Kevin Garlick because he came from the utility side and kind of knows where Provo was leaning. And so it's been very good to work with him. I do have to say that our staff, Tad Smallcomb, Scott Bunker, Charlie and Kat, they really went through their budgets and took a good look and cut their budgets where they thought that they could do it. I went back and looked at how many personnel we had in 20 years ago, 2000. We had about 100 to 105 employees. Now 25 were with customer service. So we have 65 employees now. So we are still 10 employees lower than we were 20 years ago. And I think we're doing so much more. I think our system is much more reliable, and that we can show that with the indices. And I think a lot of that has to do with the managers that run a very good ship here. So I appreciate all the work that they've done.
Well, keep it up. We appreciate those general fund contributions.
Mr. Harding.
I think Mr. Fillmore said it well, so I'll just second his comment.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Travis. We appreciate you very much and appreciate your good communication with us and all the hard work you and your staff do.
And just so you know, next week we're going to do a work session where we'll talk about our resources and go into much more depth. That's kind of why I skipped over it today.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it next week. Thanks.
Well, you almost got us back on schedule entirely in one fell swoop, so we appreciate it. All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item, which is a presentation by the Provo City Fire Department. This will be given by Jim Miguel, our Provo City Fire Chief. It says James Miguel on the schedule, but I've always known you as Jim. I don't know if that's
that is so official.
Okay.
Yes, it is Jim. It is Jim.
Thank you for being here.
Chair Handley, members of the council, I appreciate this opportunity. I think if I had to go back after listening to what's happened today and the discussion about the budget and those things, I'm going to go through my presentation, but I don't want you to think that I'm oblivious to what's going on. We were given some budget instructions and I will follow those, but I knew you wanted to know a little bit about the fire department and a little bit about those things that we see as needs coming up. So please understand I'm not oblivious to that, and I'm gonna do the rest to get you back on schedule. The fire department, just a little bit about the fire department for those that aren't familiar. We have 83 full-time employees. We have 79 safety employees and 4 support employees. We staff 5 fire stations. 4 of those fire stations have a piece of fire apparatus and an ambulance, and the downtown station right now just houses an ambulance and the battalion chief. Last year we had about 11,700 responses. Those are gradually going up. And one thing that's unique about our responses as a fire department I guess it's important to note is that we are the advanced life support transport provider. So we transport somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 people a year to the hospital during a medical emergency. The fire department has several divisions. We have a fire administration division that's really just myself and an administrative assistant and my deputy chief, Chief Jeremy Hedman. And you can imagine we are just the policy, budget, personnel support, and training division. Our fire prevention division is one of their primary responsibilities is community development. They are a key member of the development community. Every structure in the city has a fire and life safety component, and fire prevention are the ones that make sure that those are done correctly. They're also the ones that ensure that older buildings, that the fire and life safety components still exist. They are responsible for fire investigation in the city of Provo. The fire department is responsible only to determine whether it is the fire has been accidental or incendiary. The fire is human caused and on purpose. Then we work closely with the police department to find out exactly what happened. Our fire prevention is primarily responsible for public education, although, as you know, every fire engine, every ambulance is out doing public education events all the time. Our public information officer, our public information comes out of our Fire Prevention Bureau, and our community risk reduction, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Next slide. Emergency preparedness. We've done a lot of drills on this lately between a COVID-19 virus and an earthquake. We've had the opportunity to bring our emergency operations center together. This is Chris Blinzinger. He is your emergency manager. He is responsible for community education when it comes to preparedness. Our CERT program, our mass notification system, the system that it used to be in Provo that we had horns that sounded in a few locations. Those have been disconnected, and now we hope to get people by telephone or email or many other ways, but that's the mass notification system. And then he provides citywide training. That's emergency preparedness training and emergency operations center training to all of our city employees. And that also includes some EMS training that they do, stop the bleed, CPR, those kinds of things to our city employees. Next slide. Then we have emergency operations. This is where 75 of our 83 personnel work. They're responsible for fire suppression, hazardous materials. If you can spill it, make a mess with it. It's hazardous to the environment. Then we take care of that. And with our rescue, if you can get stuck in it, get lost in it, get hurt while doing it, we also respond to those and take care of all of our rescue operations in the city. I might say that our mountain rescue team is a joint venture between Provo Fire and Provo Police. It is one of the best I've ever seen, and the relationship could not be better. And so we're grateful for that. We spend a lot of time up on our mountains pulling people out that didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And then we have our emergency medical services division. And as I said, we are responsible for advanced life support. We run an engine and an ambulance to all EMS calls. That's a total of 4 people. If we know going in that we have a full arrest, somebody that is not breathing, their heart is not beating, we'll send 1 more additional unit. Again, we provide transport services to somewhere between 25 and 3,000 people per year. We also there's a tremendous amount of training and certifications that come with our advanced life support, our fire paramedics. And probably, I haven't done the math, but probably 95% of our employees are fire paramedics. And so the training and certification is a big commitment. We constantly have to be concerned about state regulations. That's a big part of what we do. The Bureau of EMS out of the state of Utah has a great deal of influence into how we run our system, everything from how we run our system to what we can charge as we transport. And then it is the one part of the fire department that brings in a significant amount of revenue. I believe last year it was $1.7 million in revenue was brought in by emergency medical services transport. Next slide. The fire department, about 2 years ago, the fire department became responsible for the Emergency Communications Center, or our 911 center. Some really exciting things have happened there. We have just for a little background, over the last 16 years or so, a police lieutenant has been responsible for running the communications center. They rotate about every 2 years. One of the changes that we've made there is that the police lieutenant went back to the police department, and we hired a new professional communications manager, somebody that is solely focused on 911 systems, understands how they operate, is up on the latest trends. We think it's going to be a phenomenal transition, and that just became, he came to work 2 weeks ago. So he jumped right from the frying pan into the fire. We have 26 full-time positions. 23 of those positions are currently filled. We have 5 part-time employees, and we have had a hard time hiring dispatchers, not just hiring them, but keeping dispatchers. It's a very difficult job. And because it sounds like you can do it, you find out very quickly whether you're made for it or not. We made some salary adjustments with the help of the mayor's office and the finance division and HR. We made some salary adjustments there. We were one of the lowest paid dispatch centers in the state. That was corrected, and we rank very well. And I think that's going to be huge in our retention and our ability. It's already allowed us to hire 4 what we call laterals. One of our dispatchers has been a dispatcher for 18 years. One has been a dispatcher for 6. So we've been able to go out and get some very skilled talent, and we're grateful for that. We have 5 part-time employees, and those employees are they were extremely important when we were down to 18 full-time positions that we had filled. They fill heavy duty times. We'll have maternity leaves, we'll have sickness, and those part-time employees basically just fill in for our full-time employees. This year, we're working to accomplish the first-time standalone budget for our communications center. It is currently, or it has been in the past several years, in the police department and somewhat commingled. And we are working very diligently to present you a budget where they have their own budget in virtually every category and can operate the way that they should. We're certainly excited about that. One of the things that we have always done in the dispatch center, at least over the last 10 years, is we have balanced the budget and balanced our overtime budget based on the fact that we have always had vacancies. Well, now we have most of our vacancies filled. We don't have those salary savings. So we're trying to come up with what is an appropriate overtime budget and part-time budget for the dispatch center. Because all of our positions are filled, that doesn't mean that there won't be any overtime. We have maternity leaves, we have illnesses, we have trainings, vacations, those kinds of things that we'll have to fill. So we will be coming forward with a small overtime budget for our emergency communications center. Next slide, please. Our fire department general plan goals. Next slide. So this is just a little bit of how we work. I know the police chief, when he made his presentation, they do their staffing levels based on a population ratio. And the fire department doesn't do that. The national standard for fire staffing and fire response is a systems approach. And basically that says that when there is a working fire in Provo, we will be able to put 15 firefighters and 1 command officer on scene for what we call an effective response force. The first unit arriving in 5 minutes or less, and the rest of the units arriving in 9 minutes or less. Now that's actually driving time. It's actually 6 and 10 if you talk from the time that they're dispatched. So our station location, our staffing, and our calls for service equal what we call system reliability. And that is how, when we look at all of those factors, that is how we determine how staffing and how distribution should be done. Another twist to this, though, is that we are the only EMS provider in town. If we don't go, nobody goes. With the exception of the fact that we can and have both done some work for and accepted the help of Orem and Springville in very rare occasions. They're in the same position we are. We can staff for about 95% of our emergencies. So can they. But we have a mutual and automatic aid program that allows us to go and help in those real intense times. Our fire at 2230 Canyon Road, great example. We had Orem and Springville there. Just 2 weeks before that, Orem had a significant apartment fire where they had Provo and Pleasant Grove there. So we do have a system of share and a mutual and automatic aid program. Next slide. Another one of the council goals is looking at our facilities. And And we are so grateful to the community and to the council, certainly to the mayor's office, for the building of Fire Station number 2. That is going to be a community. It's going to be a community structure where they will be proud of it, and they will be able to come there, take care of or use the community room, and know that we are there for them. We're very excited about that. Station 3 and Station 5. Station 3 is right across the street from the DI on Columbia Lane. Station 5 is at 700 East and 300 South. Those are great fire stations in the right place, but we've been doing some updating. We've been doing some remodeling. Station 1 and Station 4. Station 4, we've done some remodeling in. It is on the west side at 2050 West and 95 South. And we've done some work in that station. We've been taking care of some new standards. I've been before you to receive budget allocations for carcinogen reduction programs. We have gotten a long ways into those. We're very appreciative. We've tried to eliminate the challenge that carcinogens create in our fire stations, and that includes the diesel emissions program that we put into Station 3 and Station 4, which has been very effective, and I owe facilities a great deal of gratitude for that. And as I said, Station 3 and Station 4, we've been dolling up. We've been painting and doing some long-awaited renovations in those. They really haven't. There hasn't been much that's happened there in 15 years or so. So, next slide. Forward. There we go. Thank you. So I told you when I talked to you last week about Fire Station number 1, I told you we'd be coming to you on a fire department master plan project. There are some things that we need to know. The fire department and the stations and the staffing was last studied 20 years ago. And it wasn't a staffing study, it was just a fire station study. So I can't tell you when the last time our staffing has been studied. But there are some questions that need to be answered before we really can move forward into some very important times for the fire department. One is, what is the best location for Station 1? We know it needs to be in the downtown, but we don't necessarily know that it needs to be on that piece of property that it was headed to, and especially given what a developer may want to do with the rest of those blocks. So we need to know what the best location for Station 1 is. We have a huge growth issue, and it's only going to get more intense. Hopefully the economy will recover and we'll continue building. But where will Station 6 be? Station 6 has been slated for the northwest part of town up by the new high school. As you can see on the map, and I know it's hard on your computers, but basically we have one resource west of the freeway, and that's at Station 4. So we've got this incredible growth that's taking place on the west side. We need to know where the best location, the best long-term location for Station 6 is going to be. And then with success comes additional work, right? So we have been granted the money to build an additional terminal out at our airport. Well, as we increase the number of flights, the amount of police and fire staffing that needs to be out there also increases. A commercial flight cannot land or take off unless the fire department is on site. Currently now, we just go out there to meet the flights or pay a little bit of overtime to have somebody out there when the flights arrive. We have a crash fire rescue that is out there that we go out but we believe that there's this big question on the west side. Where does Station 6 go? Is Station 4 in the best location, or could Station 4 be somewhat utilized, and we could resolve the southwest part of town and the airport, kind of killing two birds with one stone? So that study, we feel like it really needs to take place so that we have a good roadmap as to where we go as we grow and we enjoy these successes. And then we need to talk about what appropriate staffing levels are. We need to do a call volume analysis. We need to be sure that we can put those 16 firefighters on the scene of a fire and do it in a timely fashion And it would be nice right now when we do that, we virtually have nothing left. When we respond to a working fire, especially if we call one more resource, every one of our fire stations, every one of our ambulances they're at the fire. And so as Provo gets bigger, as Provo becomes, as it ages, it becomes more and more of an issue. Next slide. We talked about this, Station 1. We have a lot of concerns about Station 1 coming up. The downtown density is really a concern. We're talking about a 14-story building. I can't even count the number of 6-story residential buildings we're talking about. As the density increases, the need for fire services increase. And as the downtown area, the larger downtown area, as it ages, it becomes more problematic from a fire protection standpoint. That is just the way that it is. So when we talk about what the future needs might be for the fire department, we're talking about a fire resource. We talked about just having an ambulance downtown, but we're talking about adding a fire engine downtown, and we have the ambulance downtown. So we're talking about the need for 6 personnel downtown. When we open a fire station, there are 5 people per platoon, and we have 3 platoons. So that would require 15 personnel. And then we have to talk about Station 4 and what that might look like in what airport staffing. I think it's important to tell you now that in the year 2000, the fire department had 81 employees. 20 years ago, we had 81 employees. In the year 2010, we had 84 employees. In the year 2020, we have 83 employees. We are at a point, and again, this is why I started the conversation by saying I am not oblivious to what's going on. But at least we can do the study and we can understand where we are. And as hopefully this will be just a minor setback, and we can kind of get busy putting this fire department together for the future. But it's building a fire station and staffing it is a labor intensive and costly venture. Next slide, please. So I've got this list of supplemental budget requests, and I just, these are not requests now as much as they are just issues. We have a pretty significant issue along the bench. We have been working hard to try to get the community to clean their properties and reduce the risk that we see down there. As I've said to the community many times, if we think with the right conditions that we can't have a fire start in Slate Canyon and burn to Provo Canyon right across our mountain, we are kidding ourselves. And the only way that we're going to avoid that is if we can get up there and do some mitigation efforts. And that requires property owners to clean their properties and for us to make some good decisions about development up there. And so at some point, we need to talk about a community risk reduction specialist, somebody where that becomes their function, is to go and work very closely with the community. Our Fire Prevention Bureau exists of 3 people, and up until right now, they have been so busy with new development, so busy doing plan checks and inspections and all that they do in new development that that's been very difficult to do much community risk reduction. Advanced life support equipment. Again, we are the ambulance in town, and your opportunity to survive a heart attack or a major emergency is only as good as we are. And we have some equipment, our advanced life support equipment, that is aging out. And we are looking at a replacement system for that equipment, and that they have a 5-year program where you can get this equipment for all of our department, replace this equipment, and it's about $45,000 a year for 5 years. Regardless of how bad the budget gets, we are going to work very hard to find that. We are seeing studies that show that the stuff that we are talking about increases survival rates by 20%. Right now, it's about 3.5 in 10. If we could raise that to 5 or 5.5 in 10 that would survive a cardiac arrest, and because we're the only one they can call, they can't shop fire departments. We feel very strongly that we owe it to them to give them the absolute best chance we can give them, and that is updating our equipment. We already have wonderful personnel, but there is some equipment that can really improve. A station alerting system. We're building fire station number 2. We were looking at building fire station number 1. Our alerting system is 30 years old, and we were looking at getting something a little more modern that would match the 2 new fire stations. Over the last several years, actually, since I've been here, I've made requests for a capital equipment replacement fund. The fire department has some very expensive equipment, and it all has a sunset on it. And so we were given about $45,000 per year. The request was $107,000. We took our 8 major capital issues, we costed them out, we divided that over 10 years, and the cost is $107,000. We've been given $45,000, so the delta is $62,000 a year, and that would be ongoing. What that means is that I would no longer have to come to you out of the general fund reserves to ask for this advanced life support equipment, those kinds of things. Once we find out where Station 6 should be, before we grow very much more, we need to consider land acquisition for the fire station. And then the last supplemental that we'll talk about is just the 911, the budget adjustment to make them whole. Next. I hope I got through that in a timely fashion. I'd love to answer any questions, and I want to make an offer to any one of you. If you'd like to come and spend some time in the fire department, have a tour, and go through this in greater detail, how we operate, and I would love to.
Thank you, Chief. We have a few minutes for questions. Any questions for the Chief? I'm sure I speak for everyone in thanking you for your outstanding service and all of those who work with you, especially during this time. And unfortunately, I guess it's a perfect storm, but we're entering fire season as we're also facing a pandemic. So we're aware of the sensitivities and the sacrifices that you and those who work with you are making. So we thank you very much.
Well, in everything that we do, we feel that support, and we appreciate you. We appreciate the mayor's office, and it is certainly a pleasure to serve this community.
And I think we can understand. I appreciate getting that information, about staffing and future needs. I don't think for a minute that you're oblivious to what's going on. I think actually, in a lot of ways, what you're talking about we can't preserve safety and health in the community if we don't have the right staff. And I just lost a dear friend to a sudden heart attack. He was at a distant location, and I can appreciate the need for those resources to be available to our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on if there are no other questions. We're now at item number 7, which is a presentation by Customer Services concerning their budget. And this will be done by Karen Larson, who's the Director of Customer Service. Is she with us?
I am. Good afternoon.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Of course. So I am Karen Larson, the Customer Service Director of our 311 call center. And I'll just get started. And I guess you guys will advance the slide, or should you go ahead? Just to give you a little understanding of our customer service goals, Provo 311 is committed to serving the public interest of all Provo City residents, business owners, and visitors by providing efficient service delivery to all customers. 311 provides access to government resources while maintaining the highest possible level of quality service for all. Ongoing enhancement efforts have strengthened the focus on availability and customer experience through a diverse range of access points to ensure consistent delivery and quality service. 311 continues to promote ease of access and transparency in making government services more available to all citizens and effectively serving the needs of all Provo residents and visitors. Next slide. So Provo 311, I'll give you a little introduction on the next slide as to how we kind of came to be, give you a little history for those of you, many of you are new council members, but the agenda today will be basically going to go through the services that we provide, some of our metrics, which I feel are very powerful, very informative, and then finally to our budget. So the services provided by 311, and I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with a 311 call center operation, but it is a national operation that we adopted back in 2012. Back in 2012, our operation, my customer service operation, has been over in the power department. That's where I grew up, so to speak, in my career. I was so I've had 30 years of service with the city, and most of it was, I would say 20 of it has been over in the power department. So my history of background and for all of this staff is typically comes from that customer service area over in the power department. We grew into the call center over here at City Hall due to Mayor Curtis's vision to have a centralized call center. He really didn't know what he was asking for. In all reality, he was asking for a 311 call center, which it's funny, his vision just really came together with this. And so we relocated in 2012 over here to City Hall, and we started to learn a lot about what 311 services are throughout the country. Started to attend a lot of work conferences, specifically on the 311, to understand what the big New York and Denver and Chicago and all of them are doing. And, you know, we always say that even though they are larger than us, we all have similar services. And so it's just a matter of the quantity that comes into our operation. So that's how we kind of came to be a 311 call center. That 311 is abbreviated dialing number that the FCC did create to offload non-emergency calls from the 911 center. So, and it has done a great deal of that over the years since we've been over here. And there's a great appreciation from the dispatchers over there for doing that, because there are non-essential calls going over there that come into our operation now, and we manage all those non-emergency calls now. We are an internal service department, and so we are funded by the enterprise departments. We are funded by the power department and public works department. And always have been. We have been when my operation was over in the power department. So the funding has never changed over my whole career. And then our hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 p.m. We are one of the primary contacts areas for the city. So we found it necessary to have an operation that is open Monday through Friday for all the citizens to be able to contact the city, so that others can work the 410 schedule. The services that my operation provides is obviously the call center. We take all municipal calls, all power related calls, water, wastewater, solid waste, all of the utility service calls we take care for billing questions, inquiries on their billing, and we also take in from the counter as well, licensing and special event applications and payments. We take and manage all the airport security badging for the airport. So anyone that needs and requires a security badge, we take care of that. We work hand in hand with the airport in receiving their testing documents so that we can badge those. Most of them are employees, but a lot of them are outside support as well for the airport. We take all the payments for the parking citations here. We do electronic fingerprinting as well here, and that is for a lot of services that the citizens need for employment, for daycares and facilities such as that require fingerprinting and background checks. So we do all that here. We also, a recent service that we added was a passport service, and that's been a very successful service that we brought in here. We did some our study before we bring any service in, just so you know, we do try to make sure that this is going to be a financially feasible service to bring into our operation. Passport is definitely one of those that we looked over the fence to Orem City, and they gave us their stats on the parking or the passports and how many they do and the revenue, and I'm like, and we got that, we can take care of that. And so we did, and we've exceeded that. And so we've done really well with the passport services here. The post office was grateful that we took it on as well, but it's been beneficial. It has kept our lobby quite busy though, because obviously they do have to come in. That's nothing much online, that you do have to come in and take care of kind of that service if you want photos and things like that. We take park pavilion reservations. Those are offered online as well. We manage the payments and the reservations and things for our parks department. Then we also manage a lot of, which you'll know, the just general city information. We have citizens will call in for inquire about multitude of events that are taking place, or just simple information. And so we take a lot of general calls here, taking an offload out of all the departments back in 2012. That was the goal of us, to reduce their calls in their department and centralize those calls coming in, so we can collect data and stats on what type of calls that we're receiving in the call center. And then we also do non-emergency service requests, which is really the 311 service requests. So we take those are services that for pothole repairs, street light outs, zoning issues, graffiti, any type of request that requires an action on our part. We take those service requests. Those service requests are initiated from our office. They electronically go to the different departments. The departments get them either on a mobile device or they're getting on a desktop, and they dispatch those out to their field and coordinate those with their staff. One thing about the service requests, it is one thing that the department directors get notified within 2 weeks if those service requests are not managed and resolved within a period of time. They escalate to the director. So the directors do know if a pothole hasn't been addressed, if a work order hasn't been actually addressed, or a graffiti or something, they know it. And so because I'm another director just as they are, they have to have those kind of notifications out there, and I can't tell them, hey, you got to go get this done. I'm not their boss, but anything that I need to escalate, we'll either go to Wayne or the mayor to say, hey, somebody's not doing something, here it is. So we keep all the stats and try to satisfy our citizen requests as they come in. And so those are the primary services that we take through our operation. The next slide. So one of the recent enhancements that we have done has been to combine our a payment portal with our bill view and our smart meter information together. It was a bit of it's kind of a baby step into our launch of our Provo 360 Phase 2 project. And I failed to mention, I am the director over the Phase 2 project, launching the new software for the work management solution, as well as for our new utility billing software. So this is a baby step into what we're trying to get to overall. But this website does allow the citizen to go to one location to view and to pay for whatever need they have. The citizens also, such as our MDU customers, which are all our apartment complexes, they're able to actually hand off all of their utility bills and allow someone else to review them, such as an administrative personnel or something like that. And so the tool has been very helpful, and especially when you're managing a lot of consumption data and they're needing a lot of historical information to make some business decisions for their operation. So this is one of our recent enhancements. There's further things to come once we launch our new utility billing software and our work management software. Next slide. Here's just a little bit of, just one little sample of the many, many statistics that we collect in the call center here. I couldn't do and run my operation without statistics. This is very important for me because I need to know how many call takers I need to handle each call. And I definitely am one out of, I would say, the city that collects so many stats that it may be a little bit overwhelming for someone to look at, but it's really necessary in a call center situation. The calls answered, just a recent view of the calls that we take into the call center. In March was our highest volume that we've had. I would say, yeah, in the last year, you can see we took in 11,000 calls in March. Obviously, there's some obvious reasons why. And so we do expect some of those calls to come back down in April. But we also, in the second section there, we keep statistics on the average time it takes to answer. That red line is our goal, to answer those calls within a certain amount of time. We don't like the calls to sit and hold, so we do like to make sure that those calls are being managed in an efficient time. Just one note on the calls answered, we obviously have some peak times in there that you can see. If you look back to July, August, there are some peak times, and that's student movement that we get. So we get a lot of student calls coming in to move in and move out of their services during this time, and so it gets a little heavy. But as you can see, March is exceptionally high for us, and there's a lot of reasons due to that COVID issue and things like that. So just a sample of some of the stats we take. So if you're curious, we got them, I'm sure. So next slide. This also goes to show a little bit of comparison, how we compare to the national average. As I mentioned before, I did personally a lot of discovery and inquiry with the other 311 call centers throughout the nation. And I participate in a annual conference called CS Week, and now they've added a portion to it called 311 Engage. So at that conference, you get the opportunity to understand other cities, steal ideas, share ideas, and just improve your 311 operation. This is a survey that they put out this survey every year, and this is just a little snippet of what this survey entails. This was the 2018-2019 survey. Obviously, this conference is actually in May, and we will not be attending it this year, but we do collectively stay online and get information from one another. And it was interesting this year just trying to see whose doors were still open during this time. And it was interesting to know that the majority of the 311 call centers across the nation were open. And so there is an essential tool for the city to take calls from the citizens. So nationally, the full-time call takers was at 9.33. We're at 8. The part-time is nationally, we're right in there. We're at 8. They were at 6.75, but in total, we really are very close to the national stats there on our hiring. We have 2 floor supervisors out there. As you'll see, they're elevated in the back in their cubicles so that they have the ability to oversee the call takers and when they are needed to help assist on a call or if there's any issues or concerns there. The number of support staff, that is all, obviously we have one manager, and that's Matt Schneider, who you'll see his office on the floor as well. So he manages that floor. He's the overall manager of that operation. He is also, though, working currently on the Provo 360 project as a lead for the work management solution. So I put him over so he's dealing with all the cities or all the departments, I should say, and their work management software that we'll be launching before long. The call activity, we get a lot of IVR. If you're familiar with the IVRs, it's basically if you call in, you get the automation. You have an option to go to the automation. It doesn't send you there. You opt to, if you stay on the line, it will go directly into our live customer service rep. You have an option to go into the automation to pay your bill and take care of your business that way. You cannot currently take and do a work order for a pothole or for a new utility service request yet. Those basically for payments. You're also able to get into
the RVR, it'll transfer you to an outage situation, a power outage. And then here again is just the average, national average on calls for our city size. We obviously take more calls. We're at 97,000 on average, and the average for our population size is 66. And the reason we're so high is the rest of the call center, 311 call centers, are not necessarily utility call centers. So the unique thing about Provo is we have merged our utility calls with the 311 municipal calls. That makes us very unique, and I'm very proud of that, because when we talk to other national 311 operations, they're like, are you crazy? You take utility calls? Yes, we take utility calls. And they always wonder how we train a customer service rep to manage the utility calls. Well, it's because we historically came from the utility billing and we grew into the overall municipal call center. So it was a natural thing for us to go there. And so we get a lot of praise as Provo to be able to take all types of calls here and not just segregate the municipal calls right there. So next slide. This is our budget. Very simple. Because I am an internal service fund here, I don't have revenue coming in here. It's all basically, I get funded by the other departments as according to my budget. Travis and Dave both meet with the finance director and myself, and we go over and they understand what my budget's going to be. And so basically they're critiquing me oftentimes on what my budget is. And so there's very little variance for this next year. The chargeback should be minimal. Personnel, it's just basically the overall personnel increase for minimal, whether it's insurance or whatever, but that's pretty small right there in itself. The major decrease is in my O&M. In the operation and maintenance, so we have a major decrease here, and that is due to the Provo 360 project. Travis and I and Dave agreed that my budget would take on our consultants' fees in this budget this last year, and those were heavy because in the project right now we have a project manager, outside consultant project manager that we are paying. We're also paying another consulting firm to do our conversion. So they're taking data from my existing billing system and doing major conversion. And it's not something that an internal source can actually handle. It's pretty major when you're talking about utility billing accounts and all the details associated with that. And so that budget, we are almost live, I would say. Had it not been for COVID, we would have gone live May 5th, would have been our go live on this project, and therefore the funding was not needed for the next year. However, the project now is delayed. We're hoping the first week of June, if all goes well and the COVID situation improves, because our consultants are off-site. We're all working off-site. It's a little different environment when you're trying to do a major project like this and your consultants are off-site. And we typically have had two rooms actually, full of project down in the old economic and redevelopment room. You'll see 2 rooms down there that we have occupied simply for the project. One side is for the utility billing, the CIS project. The other side is for the work management solution. And you'll see bodies in there, or typically would have. You're not now, but our consultants were in there, and they were in there just getting everybody going through a lot of testing and implementation of the software. I did have to, this number would have been even larger had we been on target and go live in May, but I had to add money back in for the consideration of another 2 more months of paying consultants in the event we don't go live till July 1 or something like that. So, but that is a significant drop into my budget this year, and Travis was greatly appreciated for that. So anyway, next slide. I think that's it. Do you guys have any questions for me at all?
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Karen Larson? Well, we certainly appreciate all that you do, and we know that our citizens have a great resource in the city center and the services offered through your office. So thank you very much.
Of course, appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
All right, we'll move on then to our item number 8, which is a presentation by the legal department. This will be given by Mr. Brian Jones.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm happy to present to you this afternoon. I've got a fairly short presentation to allow you time for questions if you'd like, but I'm going to follow much the same format that Karen just did and talk a little bit about what our office does and how our office is set up and organized, and then a little bit about the budget. So if you go to the next slide, John, or do I have control of that? Okay, so our office is divided into 3 sections or
So
3.
Brian,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just as you begin, could you talk about what hat you're wearing right now?
Sure. Right now, I'm acting as the deputy city attorney in the city attorney's office, kind of wearing my administrative hat as a member of the city attorney's office. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the city attorney's office has 3 main responsibilities, and the office is divided thematically, I suppose, into these 3 divisions: the civil division, criminal prosecution, and the claims and litigation division. So if you go to the next slide, the civil division, this is the task of the legal office to provide legal advice, support, and review to city departments, including the mayor's office and the municipal council. And if you can go to the next slide, this will show you a breakdown of the entire office and what everyone's responsibilities are. And as far as the civil division goes, you can see under each of the attorneys, the assignments that are in blue represent departments that that attorney represents. And so each of those departments has an attorney that's their primary contact to review legal questions with them and to go over documents and agreements and help them with any legal services that they need. And then in the black are kind of topical specialties that each of the attorneys are specialized in to some degree. And if you can go to the next slide. So the criminal prosecution function, our city prosecutor is Steve Schreiner. And in addition to under his supervision, there are 5 full-time attorneys that assist with prosecution duties, one of whom is assigned to specialize in code enforcement. And one of the things that you probably should be aware of is this is pretty unique, the way we do things in our office as far as most city attorney offices, at least of our size that I'm aware of. It's much more common in city attorneys' offices to have the functions that I'm going to talk to you about today split into silos, so that there are attorneys whose job is to do prosecution, and that's the only thing they do, and they never touch civil matters. And the attorneys that do civil stuff never touch criminal things. But we've found in our experience over years of doing this and under Robert West's direction and prior city attorneys, that having kind of all of our staff cross-trained in everything is very useful and beneficial. It makes it so that everybody gets some experience in handling different kinds of things. It makes it much easier for somebody to be able to step in and cover for somebody else, because everybody has some degree of involvement in different things. So aside from myself, because of my counsel duties, and Robert West as the city attorney, all of the other attorneys in the office do at least some criminal prosecution. Steve Schreiner does the bulk of it and oversees it as the prosecutor, but all of the other attorneys spend at least some of their time doing prosecution as well. In addition to the full-time attorneys, we have 1 part-time attorney dedicated just to criminal work, and another part-time attorney whose position is paid for through a federal grant that specializes in domestic violence crimes. And then we have a paralegal and 2 full-time support staff, and then our front window is run by 2 part-time support staff that alternate mornings and afternoons in their schedule to keep our front window staffed. If you'd go to the next slide, this will give you just a little bit of an idea about what those people do. This shows just some stats. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, an information is actually the legal name for the document that's filed to start a criminal case. So those are the numbers for the past 5 years about informations that we filed, the number of pretrial conferences that our attorneys are handling, what's being brought in from the court, and fines and fees on those cases, and some code enforcement numbers. Now those numbers in that last column are the number of cases that were referred to the legal office by our code enforcement officer. All right, so then the third and last function is the Claims and Litigation Division, which actually also handles risk management for the city in conjunction with some other people. So, for example, there's a Risk Management Executive Committee in the city that Dan Follett from Finance and Wayne Parker and myself all sit on. And so in addition to this section handling claims against the city and litigation, it also addresses risk management issues in order to try to prevent future claims and litigation. So as the Deputy City Attorney, I oversee this division personally. And then we have one attorney who handles the litigation and the claims primarily himself. And we have a city safety manager that's in that division and a paralegal. And if you can go to the next slide, this shows you, again, just to give you a kind of a quick thumbnail of some of the work they do. Here's the number of claims that have been filed and processed by that division over the past few years. In addition to the claims, there's also actual civil lawsuits, usually in the kind of 10 to 15 cases at a time range. We cycle through those pretty well, where usually about the time one of them drops off, another one starts up, but we've usually got anywhere from 10 to 15 going at any one time. And then if you can go to the next slide, we'll wrap up by just talking briefly about the budget. As you can guess, with a department who works in an office environment and where everything that we do is in support of other departments of the city, our largest budget expense is personnel. The vast majority of our budget is just for personnel. But we have done, I think, very well at keeping that personnel number where it should be, and trying to do as much as we can without expanding the office too much. So as you can see from this slide, back in 1996, we had 12 full-time equivalents, and now since 2017 and continuing now to 2020, we're at 14 and a half. And I've listed there for you what that expansion was. That back in 2011, when the city attorney's office first took over legal support for the municipal council, we added a paralegal to help with the research and other documentation that was taking place. And then in 2012, the risk management function was moved from the Administrative Services Department to our department, and a full-time city safety manager was added, who was later, and that position was later changed into an assistant city attorney position, but still maintains responsibility for city safety. And then in 2017, as most of you probably remember, we took one of our part-time attorney positions and converted it to full-time in order to increase our focus on code enforcement. So that's pretty much where we're at as far as personnel goes. And as you can probably guess, looking back at that chart that I showed towards the beginning, and the list of duties for each of those employees, where everybody's very busy. There's a lot of work to be done. With the COVID-19 thing, everyone's trying to get caught up on projects, and most of them, because most of our work has to do with supporting other departments, most of our work is continuing, and most of those that I supervise are telling me they're at least as busy, if not busier than before, trying to handle all the stuff that normally goes on, plus additional emergency situations. So then finally, just briefly to talk about our operational budget. Our operational budget, our proposed budget for next year, is $92,206, which, as you can see, Robert West, as the city attorney, he started tracking back in 1996, comparing the budget each year. And so if you were to go back and look at the 1996 budget and adjust it for inflation today, our current operational budget is 88% of what it was back in 1996. and we've been down kind of in the 50 to 90s range ever since 1996, as far as trying to keep that operational budget low. And some of our ability to do that has hinged on focusing a lot of effort on going paperless in our office. So we've tried really hard to eliminate paper files, especially with our litigation and with our criminal cases. And we've implemented a lot of software solutions to try to enable us to do paperless file processing. And then I just note that the only proposed increase in the 2020 budget is that we did increase the cell phone reimbursement line item by $1,900 in order to comply with the new city policy. The city recently adopted a new cell phone policy, and that policy specified what the rates are supposed to be for those reimbursements. And so using that policy, we increased that one line item to match what the policy said. But otherwise, our budget's the same as it has been since 2016. So
I have a question from Mr. Sewell.
Yes, Brian, on the part there where it mentions the part-time attorney converted to full-time in 2017 to increase focus on code enforcement, I was trying to remember from the earlier slides, it seemed like the number of cases being referred for code enforcement was actually going down, if I remember right. So I was just curious on your perspective on that.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I was thinking about that myself as I put together the slides. So my recollection is, so I think you can see, I need to try to move your faces are all right over the numbers for me. So, okay, now I can see. So I think the increase in 2017 has a lot to do with that increased focus and the fact that that person came on board and started doing code enforcement. And then you'll notice that even in 2018, our numbers were up considerably from the year prior to the change, and now they're back down again. And I guess I would, this is kind of speculation on my part, and we could certainly come and do a presentation on this later or get some more information for you. But I think in my mind, I think there's two reasons for that. One is I think that's a tribute to the success of the program, of how it has helped to transfer part of the code enforcement function to the criminal division of the legal office, because I think it's a testament to how people react when they get the letters from our office. Now, the one thing that I should point out, just kind of for those who weren't part of this discussion back in 2017, is the numbers right there in that column refer to how many cases get referred to our office. It's not how many people get criminally prosecuted for code enforcement. Because when those cases get referred over to our office, the attorney over code enforcement reviews the case and then sends and consults with community and neighborhood services, and then sends out a letter to the alleged violator, notifying them of the violation and that criminal prosecution will ensue if they don't correct the problem. And in the vast, vast, vast majority of the cases, those get resolved before criminal charges ever get filed. I do have, if you were interested, I have somewhere open on my desktop the actual numbers as far as how many get filed, and so I could look that up for you. But in any event, I think part of it is that the program is being successful at bringing people into compliance. I also think that it has to do with some things that you've heard from community and neighborhood services about their staffing levels, right? That our department or the code enforcement efforts from the legal office are dependent upon cases being referred to us from community and neighborhood services. So we can only handle as many cases as we get, if you understand. And so I think that one, I think you've heard presentations before on their staffing levels and needs. And two, I think that there's one of the things that's probably going on there over the past couple of years is that the easy cases are getting handled and the harder cases take more time, and therefore less of them get processed in a given year.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Jones? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Jones. We appreciate your time, as always.
Happy to be here.
Okay, we're down to our last presentation by our very own Cliff Strachan to talk about the Provo City Council office and our proposed budget. Are you there, Mr. Strachan?
Yes, I'm there. Am I also visible? I seem to have lost my...
I don't see you right now.
Okay. Well, that's not good.
Should we read your email?
Yeah, I should read my email. My apologies. I had it up here just a second ago. And I'll stop the share. John, do you have it? I was trying to share it. I had been tweaking it today, and there we go. Okay. So the council office budget largely hasn't changed from year to year either. John, can I take control of that?
And we do know, Cliff, you do have that ringing sound. We can hear you fine, but it is coming from you.
Okay.
You have it, Cliff.
Is that ringing sound still there?
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. We'll make this quick. John, if you'll scroll down to the first graph.
You have it.
Oh, I had it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the council office budget is approximately $1.1 million every year. The only numbers that typically change are things like personnel costs. Sometimes we make minor changes in some operating numbers. But for example, the audit goes up every year by $1,000 under our contract. Of our budget, there's only about 19% of our entire budget is discretionary. And I'll come back to that in a couple minutes here. But let me just go through the same questions that others have been asked to do. Essentially, the council office exists to support the council in its legislative role. Basically, our costs are personnel costs and some operating costs. Among the items in the discretionary portion of the office budget are the neighborhood program, youth council, matching grants for neighborhood improvements, and professional services, which include monitoring the city's audit, and also we have some money set aside for outside legal services if we need, and then other support things like travel and training, meals, expenses, supplies, the usual things. We do a lot with Open City Hall is a significant expense in our area. Generally, the role of the city is to support all of the departments. City council is to support all of the city departments as they need policy changes to affect the various things from the general plan. Scroll down a little bit more. Are there goals and objectives where we feel like we could do more if we were given more budget? I think we've done a good job managing with what we've had. Currently, in the current circumstances, there's not anything I would add to our budget. In fact, we've been asked to look at what to cut or reduce next year. I mentioned in here that we have about 75% are personnel costs. If we were to reduce our budget by 5%, we would have to come up with $57,000. And that would make a significant challenge for us. I'm going to tell you, I'll go to that in a second, but before I go down there, if there are other requests to the 21 budget before council, one of them would be to move Ms. Provo to the mayor's office, and one would be to move the internal audit funding from administrative services to the council office budget. But significantly, where our issues are is we have about $214,000 that's discretionary for us, starting with office operations of about $50,000. That includes everything from meals to paper to printing to all the supplies and a host of other things within there. Then we have our contract services this year was $46,000. We can anticipate it'll be $47,000 next year. We have an allowance that by policy starts at $15,000 for professional services like legal, and with carryover it can go as high as $30,000, and we're at the maximum of $30,000 at present. Matching grant starts every year at about $30,000, and we have some carryover. So this year we carried over about $5,000 or $7,000 for that. Travel and training costs within our operating budget are about $21,000, and as you know, that's pretty much on hold because everything's been canceled in the latter part of the fiscal year. Community relations, that's really Karen's role, and that includes the money for Open City Hall and various things that we do in terms of outreach and public relations. Neighborhood program is kind of a catch-all for some expenses. We do various things. We do a couple of meals along with our seminars each year. And then we have $2,000 set aside for the Youth Council, and they do a lot of good service work. And then, of course, we fund the Miss Provo Scholarship. And therein lies our discretionary budget. It's fairly stand pat. I only mention it because in terms of what we look for reductions, if there are going to be reductions from that, it comes from probably the first spot to look at is an internship, and the other spot is to figure out what to do with some of our contract services and things like that. But that's my presentation to you. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Cliff? All right. Well, I see Shannon Ellsworth has a question.
That's okay.
All right.
No worries.
Any other questions for anybody, I guess? Well, most people have left who presented, but if there's no desire for further discussion, Cliff, yeah.
What I would tell you is, as I did mention it in one of my messages to you off the side, was that in subsequent meetings, you'll be asked as a council to provide some direction to the mayor in terms of what your priorities are, what you would like to see. We know we've got some significant issues to bring back. The administration is working hard at looking at where to provide some savings in the current fiscal year, and then really what to do on a larger scale in the next fiscal year. And those decisions will be coming back to you. But think about, in terms of the priorities, you've heard and seen some of the supplemental requests, some of the needs. Where would you prioritize, and plan on coming back either next week or the week after, and provide some direction to the mayor and her senior staff.
All right. Yeah, that'll be something important. Yes, Ms. Ellsworth.
Cliff, do you think most of the city expenses outside of maybe infrastructure are human resource related?
Yeah, I can't remember the number, but it's a significant portion, especially in general fund funded areas. Most of the people that work in the city hall, Wayne will give you a better response to that, but I think you'll see that where general fund is supplied, it's generally for personnel. Wayne?
Yeah, that's accurate, Cliff. When you get out of the utility funds, which tend to be, again, a lot more O&M focused rather than personnel, but in the general fund, it's in the low 70% range of total general fund budget that's associated with personnel costs. So it is very difficult to make substantive changes to the general fund without affecting personnel in some fashion.
Gotcha. Is it appropriate to consider today or next month or the next month a hiring freeze?
So we have met with our directors once last week and generated a pretty good list of ideas. Hiring freeze is one of those, along with some other things. We've asked our directors to get back to us this week if they had anything to add to the list or any serious concerns. On Monday, the administrative staff is getting together, mayor's office staff, to review that information. We've asked finance, administrative services to give us some numbers associated with each option. We'll be prioritizing those internally on Monday, meet again with directors on Tuesday in our regular monthly meeting with all the department directors to review that data, and then we'll be reporting back to council as we put the finishing touches on our recommendations for what to do not only this year, but also in anticipation of some pretty substantial revenue reductions next year, under the assumption that we don't bounce back from the recession as quickly as we will bounce back from the pandemic.
Well, we appreciate that and expect that we have some hard choices to face moving forward. But we will try to provide you, I think, with a sense of our priorities. I think this has been very helpful for us to get a sense, and this maybe especially for the new council members, to get a sense of what the different departments do and where their funding has gone in the past, and what are some of the needs moving forward. I don't know. I think I heard the area of the greatest concern for me seemed to be the fire department. I mean, it seems like we're talking about a department that's been underfunded for a while, and you know, if we're going to cut back from their current budget, we're going to hurt them even more. But
yeah, it's probably important to note we're not looking at at least significantly at across the board kinds of numbers. I think we want to be a lot more surgical in our approach. When we did this in 2008, 2009, we had a wide variety of strategies that were involved. Again, trying to take advantage of attrition. We looked at some early retirement incentives. We created some opportunities, I think, to get the organization right-sized. The good news is that, as Travis indicated to you earlier, for the most part, we have not come even close to getting back to pre-2008 employment levels in the organization. And so we eliminated 52 positions across the city in 2008, 2009, and I would wager we have not increased. Well, maybe if you take police out of the equation, we have not increased more than a dozen positions in that 12-year time frame. So again, it has not been like in the time of plenty, we staffed up because we took advantage of that opportunity. We tried to deploy resources into capital needs, which were significantly shorted during that recession period. So I think we're in a better position to weather the storm now than we were in 2008, 2009. And I think we've got some tools at our disposal that will help. Again, It's not going to be easy. We don't expect it to be painless, but it will. I think it will be easier than what we went through in the Great Recession 12 years ago.
Well, let's all hope you're right.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you have any objection, you're going to need to unmute yourself and speak up. But if there is no objection, we will adjourn this municipal council meeting. I see no objection. So thank you all for your time, and it's good to be with you all, even if we're not physically present.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.